Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Michael, aka Hands and Feet from hehasanswers.com. And tonight we're going to be talking about the reality that a lot of people that have identified as leftists and people on the left have been leaving the left. And so we're going to look at some of those testimonies tonight of why people are doing that, because it really seems like, I think it's important for us to address the, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe the emotional reality of why people are hanging on to the left and have been deceived into believing that the left and the philosophies and ideologies and political aims of the left are actually where they're going to find the solutions and the answers to the problems we face in our country and our culture and around the world, when in actuality, the only thing we're going to find traveling down this agenda on the left is going to be tyranny, oppression, and a complete stripping of our freedoms. We've already looked at a few things in regards to, let me just pull this up here. A couple of weeks ago. So we've been going through we started off looking really at the reality that very powerful, influential people do not have our best interests at heart because they themselves are actually quite evil. We looked at very clear evidence that there are sexual pedophile rings going on all around the world. In fact, Ghislaine Maxwell, the girlfriend and facilitator for Jeffrey Epstein, she was the one recruiting a lot of the underage women into his sex ring to be used by other powerful, often famous people. So she's now been arrested. And they announced today that she would not be able to go out on bail. So she's going to have to remain in jail until all of the hearings are done, which is good. Hopefully she's not allowed to commit suicide, because she knows so many of these people, of these powerful people. And if she's willing to sing in hopes of getting a lighter sentence or something, then there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be found out about this. Anyways, on the left, anyone who's familiar with the political spectrums that we were all indoctrinated with in high school back in the 90s and onwards, on the left you've got socialism, communism, Marxism, etc. But we already saw, looking before, a couple of weeks ago now, that a former FBI agent named Cleon Skousen put out a book after doing a whole bunch of research on how the Soviet Union was subverting and taking over all and influencing all these nations, and was working to subvert the United States of America as well as every other Western nation. And there were 45 goals to do that. So we went through them all and we saw that they've already been done. And then we looked at, and here's a YouTube video if you want to just listen to the short version. It's 8 minutes long. And then we looked at ex-KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov. And he, how's it going there, Saint Suicide Strip? Thanks for tuning in. And he was a propaganda expert, a tool of the Soviet Union while stationed in India, trying to subvert India to go along with the communist agenda. And the whole entire time, the agenda was, of course, to take over the entire world. We looked at the reality that very wealthy people like the Rockefeller family actually funded the Bolshevik Revolution in the early 1900s, which is where the communist Soviet Union came out of. And then, of course, the reality that Marxism, communism, socialism, they're all the same thing, basically. And so this is the agenda that people on the left unknowingly, unwittingly are a part of. Actually, a lot of them, and we're going to look at this next week. People in charge of different social movements themselves proclaim to be Marxists, and their whole desire is to destroy the Western system that we have been living under for the last, well, many of us, hundreds of years. Hey, what's up, Chad? Thanks, man. Yeah, so we've been living under a lot of freedoms. You know, it hasn't been perfect. We can all agree on that. But the system they want us to be in is one of complete socialist one world government where everyone is subjected to the system. All of our cash is digitized, okay? And they've been working on this for a while. That's why right now we're being told, you know, no one's going to accept your money because of COVID. And there's articles out. You can go find them. Lots of people all over the economic sector are writing, you know, cash is dead. Let's now move to a digital currency. And so we're going to have this tyrannical, oppressive system where you feel you have an illusion of being a free citizen, but all of your cash is locked up in a digital system. And China already has this in place where there's a social credit system. Okay, so if you do things that are socially against the grain, things that the government does not like, or even things that the majority does not like, you lose social credit score and you lose freedoms, you lose your liberties. There's people that because they've posted things on social media in China against the government, they aren't allowed to take the train to travel outside their city. They're basically locked in their small area. It's things like that. You won't have access to your money, etc. So the reason you have capitalists, they're not really capitalists. I don't know what you'd call them, just greedy, evil people with lots of wealth who just can't get enough of it. They funded the system and they're funding the agenda of this to be pushed onto us because if they can have governments control us and the governments are puppeted by them, which is already happening in the Canadian government. It's not hard to find out. China has its fingers deep into our government and makes a lot of controlling decisions. They're working very hard to take over the United States. They donate loads of money to all the educational institutions and universities in the United States. These things aren't conspiracies. These are like well-known facts that you can go and just find news articles on them. And as I was going to do tonight about the horrible bias of the news and how news is actually a propaganda tool for the left. And here we have Yuri Bezmenov, definitely someone who defected from the left as it can get. He would admit to it. He was a tool of it. They would invite journalists from the West over to the Soviet Union to show them how wonderful their system was in order to indoctrinate people into believing that. And then, of course, they would recruit and invite only the most gullible and most susceptible people to believe in this way of life. And then those journalists would go back to the West and write about how amazing it was to be in a socialist communist system. But yeah, so they're puppeting these governments because they want the government, a one world government, to control everyone, wherein they will use their crony corporatist, ways to then have the governments determine that only their industries can be the ones that are being used for us to make purchases from. So we'll have this semblance of freedom. We'll be making our purchases through our digitized currency that's unlocked by our government because we're good citizens, and we'll only be able to buy from certain places. For example, even now we saw a test run of that with COVID where it was not safe for you to go to your mom and pop clothiers or your mom and pop grocery store, but you could go to all the big box corporate places. You could still, go to Costco. You could still, you could order off of Amazon. Amazon, we showed last week, had its best quarter. And then we talked a little bit last week. We talked exclusively last week about the reality. We talked exclusively last week about the reality that there's this whole firearms ban in the name of safety is a guise for firearms disarmament. And we looked at the reality in history, and even recently with Venezuela, which in 2012 banned private ownership of firearms. And then by 2016, completely fell into disarray because of the tyranny going on there, and the whole system under socialism collapsed. But they want to take away our firearms, and they've decided to start with the most effective ones, semi-automatic long rifles, in order to keep us from protecting our liberties and our freedoms. And I promised I would show something from the UN. I couldn't find it last week because I didn't have time to. I was at a barbecue with friends, so I didn't have time to look at it right away. But here we are, United Nations. This is their official documentation here. This is their website, the Office for Disarmament Affairs. Okay, so small arms. Small arms refers to stuff that shoots a bullet. Okay, and if someone's just looking at this, has no idea what's going on, they would just say, well, yeah, this is about making sure that drug lords and militia can't have guns, and gangs can't have guns, and it's a good thing. Yeah, let's get behind this, because guns in the wrong hands are bad. I don't think we can disagree on that. But then when you start looking at it a little deeper, you see things like this, like right in this documentation about the illicit manufacturing and trafficking of firearms by criminal elements. We've got the Firearms Protocol provides for a framework for states, meaning nations, to control and regulate licit arms and arms flow. Licit means legal, okay? Prevent their diversion into the illegal circuit, facilitate the investigation and prosecution of related offenses without hampering legitimate transfers. So they are saying we've got to find a way to control legal firearms and firearm distribution and retail and whatnot in order to combat the illegal side, which we're being told right now by our own minister, Bill Blair, is their aim, when they're doing absolutely nothing to crack down on what's going on with the borders, okay, and what's going on with crimes. They let out people arrested for gun crime and violent crime. They let them out on bail in Toronto, and those guys go back and offend while they're waiting for their hearings. There was something else down here too I wanted to look at. It was really creepy when I read through this. Like, they've got aims and desires, not this specifically, but just all the documentation. They have aims and desires to set up like after school education programs for youth to get involved in, like, can you imagine, instead of getting together after school to play basketball or whatever, you're going to these anti-armed disarmament United Nations, basically brainwashing sessions. And then we see here, no region in the world is exempt from the dramatic consequences of firearms violence. And of course, anyone who's not thinking and just thinks this is all about, the best for everyone, says, oh yeah, well, they're only talking about like those, shanty town villages over in like underdeveloped nations where militiamen are just, looting and killing. No, they're talking about everywhere. No region in the world is exempt from the dramatic consequences of firearms violence. While the death toll in the context of armed conflicts is well known, less evident, but even more dramatic, is the fact that more lives are lost worldwide from non-conflict firearms events than do during ongoing wars. The problems associated with firearms violence covers the whole spectrum of human security, ranging from high levels of individual physical insecurity, domestic violence, and street gang and criminal violence. So, of course, street gang, criminal violence, well, the way to tackle that is to actually stop the illegal distribution of firearms, so stop smuggling, and also be hard on people the very few people, by the way, that purchase large quantities of firearms legally and then sell them into gangs. That's very rare, by the way. So it's by no means an excuse to take away illegal firearms owners' rights to own firearms. But domestic violence, friends, means taking guns out of the home of your everyday citizens so that they can't use it on their spouse. And from what we've heard from Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland and Bill Blair, they're most concerned, of course, about violence towards wives, which should concern you, but does a woman have the tendency to shoot a husband as frequently as a husband does the woman? Probably not, if you look at the statistics. But a firearm is a great equalizer, and a woman can very easily kill a man with a firearm. On average, every 15 minutes, this is another document of theirs. On average, every 15 minutes, the use of a firearm results in a violent death somewhere around the world. That's most likely including, firearm deaths here in Canada. There's no way that the bureaucrat, globalist peon went through all the statistics and only looked at the ones where, it was was breaking it down in order to make sure that law-abiding citizens would not have their rights infringed upon. So this is gonna, it's gonna include everything, and and just their solution, of course, is to take firearms away from people. The use of firearms results in a violent death somewhere around the world. The widespread availability of small arms and light weapons and their ammunition is a key enabler of armed violence and conflict. Obviously. But when we look at, what Yuri Bezmenov said about the Soviet Union and how the right to own firearms was taken away and everything, and how, as we've seen again and again through leftist Marxist systems, which we are falling into very rapidly here. The freedoms that we don't have, friends, our freedom of speech is heavily rescinded here in Canada. Our freedoms of thought are being affected. Our freedoms of assembly, so much is going on. And I hope everyone is seeing this. The widespread availability of small arms, light weapons, high levels of arms and ammunition in circulation. So look at this. High levels of arms and ammunition in circulation contribute to insecurity, cause harm to civilians, facilitate human rights violations, and impede humanitarian access. So, is this distinguishing legal sales, importing, exporting of firearms and ammunition between law-abiding citizens and law-abiding retailers from gangs and evil organizations? I doubt it. And then there was something interesting up here. Gender equality. Men and women are affected differently by the proliferation and use of weapons. Young men are overwhelmingly responsible for the misuse of small arms. We had Chrystia Freeland, and even Justin Trudeau blaming gun crime, and many people on the left blaming gun crime on misogyny. It's always some angry male that's doing all this mass shooting. And, that may be so, but it's not because, it's just so awful that they blame it on a man problem rather than just a problem with the way people are thinking. While men make up most direct casualties, women are more frequently victims of gender-based violence that small arms facilitate. Regulating arms and ammunition can reduce violence against women and girls in both public and private spheres. So, this was a big thing that they talked about with this recent ban May 1st. And they've been adding guns every day since. My advice to you, friends, while the getting's good, get your possession acquisition license. Get your restricted private possession acquisition license. Get the best, most effective guns you can, because that's the only thing that's going to maintain your freedoms. You're not going to be able to vote for freedoms. As time goes on, they're gonna make voting's just going to get more and more fraudulent. But anyway, so I promised I wanted to show this last time. I didn't get a chance, and so here it is. And then I also made a statement about our rights, stating that as people possessing hunting rifles and sporting rifles or rifles effective for either or, we can't have that right infringed upon. So I thought it was in the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. What the CCFR here, which is the Canadian Coalition of Firearm Rights, and so they've filed this massive court action against the government for the ban, which is important for everyone to know. Like, firearms sales are a huge boon for our GDP, our gross domestic product, for our economy. It makes up about like 1.3% of our nation's economy. We export some of the best firearms stuff in the world in terms of I think it's barrels and different frames and whatnot. So, that's a huge problem for us. Thousands of jobs would be lost. There's over 4,000 registered firearm associated retailers in Canada that are being affected by this. Some of them because they dealt mostly in long semi-automatic rifles that are now all restricted or all prohibited. They're losing 80% of their business. Even one retailer that I went to, that's pretty standard. They do hunting rifles, they do precision bolt action rifles, they did the semi-automatic long rifles, they do revolvers, handguns, everything. They do fishing stuff, I think. But I asked them, how are you being hit? And they said about 30% of their retail. Okay, so 30% of your inflow cash, friends. That is huge, because most retailers, when I was doing management, you're hoping to have a margin of profit of about 40%. You reduce that, okay, from 30% from that initial 100% of the money coming in. You reduce that 30%, so now you're only making 10% profit. That's not enough for most businesses, So they're just going to sink this all. Anyways. So the CCFR, and the last thing is, the big question is, if the government can come and take away our property, everyone in Canada is next. And that's what we're talking about. The reality that the agenda is an oppressive system where you have an illusion of freedom, but you actually have ownership of nothing. That is what the Soviet Union was all about, and that's what they want for us. But they write here, because the firearms affected by the regulation and the bans by FRT are in fact reasonable for use in Canada for hunting and sporting purposes, the CCFR is asking the court for a declaration of that. So we look over here at the government's own Firearms Act, and we read that, you can receive certification for firearms that relate to hunting or sporting purposes. Okay, and they say this again: hunting, sporting purposes. It's all throughout this documentation, firearms license regulations. So in our Firearms Act, if we are permitted sporting and hunting rifles, why are they then making all of these things prohibited? So these were two things I wanted to point out last week when I talked about firearms. I'm so sorry I missed it. But now let's get on to what we were going to talk about, which is why people are leaving the left. And honestly, it's because they're waking up to what's really going on. A lot of this is going to deal with Democrats, Republicans down in the States, but we're the same thing up here in Canada. We've got liberals on the left, and we've got true conservatism on the right. Our Conservative Party is actually very center and left. They are a part of the problem for sure, because they had no standards, they had no convictions, and they just slid, hoping to get more and more votes rather than just be effective at what they were doing. But over the last about 77 decades, we have just gone totally over to the left as a nation. So, first one here, this is from a fellow named Brandon Straka, and it's called Why I Left the Democrat Party. Here's his story.
Once upon a time, I was a liberal. Well, to be honest, less than a year ago, I was still a liberal. I became a liberal because I felt I'd found a tribe whose values aligned with my own. I staunchly reject racism of any kind. I reject the marginalization of any human being based off of their gender or sexual orientation. I reject tyrannical groupthink. I reject a system which allows an ambitious, misinformed, and dogmatic mob to suppress free speech, create false narratives, and apathetically steamroll over the truth. I reject the acceptance of junk science and superstition to advance ideological agendas. I reject hate. These are the reasons why I became a liberal. And these are the same reasons why I am now walking away.
Woo!
For years now, I have watched as the left has devolved into intolerant, inflexible, illogical, hateful, misguided, ill-informed, un-American, hypocritical, menacing, callous, ignorant, narrow-minded, and at times, blatantly fascistic behavior and rhetoric. Liberalism has been co-opted and absorbed by the very characteristics it claims to fight against. For years now, I've watched as people on the left have become anesthetized to their own prejudices and bigotry, and the prejudices and bigotry of those around them who echo their values. I have watched as formerly sensible people who claim to reject racism have come to embrace the principles of universally hating and blaming all of society's problems on all people who have white skin. I have witnessed the irony of advocacy for gender equality morph into blatant hatred and intolerance of men and masculinity. I have seen the once earnest fight for equality for the LGBT community mutate into an illogical demonization of heteronormativity and the push to vilify and attack our conventional concepts of gender. These same self-proclaimed victims of intolerance now turning on the gay community that they attached themselves to advance their agenda, now calling gay people privileged and themselves victims of injustice.
I just need to pause there, guys. Brandon is gay. He's a gay male in America, okay? That's one of the major reasons he was over on the left. If you've watched any of his actual interviews, he was really concerned for a long time because he believed the lies that that conservative America wanted to, kill him and sterilize him and lobotomize him and everything else.
I have watched as the left has allowed themselves to become hypnotized by false narratives and conclusions perpetuated by social justice warriors who misrepresent and misconstrue facts, evidence, and events to confirm their own biases that everyone who does not comply with their prejudicial conclusions and follow their orders is a racist, a bigot, a Nazi, a white supremacist, homophobic, Islamophobic, xenophobic, misogynistic, and alt-right extremist. And I have watched as they've used these heartless and carelessly assigned labels to intimidate, threaten, bully, silence, attack, unemploy, blacklist, and destroy anybody who dares to fight back. They'll come for me, and then they'll come for you. And worst of all, the Democratic Party and the liberal media has embraced, affirmed, aided, and abetted this cult ideology. In an effort to gain voters and maintain power, the Democratic Party that I once loved has joined forces with the extremist left. The Democratic Party and the liberal media now believe their own ill-gotten conclusions and have ominously decided that they, and only they, know the remedy for society's ills. The left has decided that the solution to problems with race relations in America is more racism. The left believes that attacking, insulting, and dehumanizing one group of people elevates another. The left now believes that there are no boundaries when telling lies, omitting the truth, or misrepresenting facts when telling the news, because their end justifies their means. The left has now decided that its point of view is the only acceptable one, and that suppressing, censoring, and banning open dialogue and debate is virtuous and progressive. The Democratic Party has adopted a deleterious belief system happily and without skepticism, separating people into groups based off of identity and then organizing them into camps of victims and oppressors. If you are a person of color, an LGBT person, a woman, or an American immigrant, the Democratic Party wants you to know that you are a victim and destined to stay that way. They will insist that you are a victim doomed to exist within a system that is rigged against you, that you are a victim of systemic oppression, that you are a victim of your circumstances, and that no amount of hard work or motivational action will ever allow you to overcome your victimhood or the privilege of those around you. This is perhaps the Democratic Party's greatest and most insidious lie. But if you are a minority in America today, the left-wing politicians and the liberal media don't want you to ever discover this lie. So they bombard us with stories designed to reinforce the narrative that you are in danger, that you cannot succeed. They manipulate your fears and concerns by telling you that you are disadvantaged, disempowered, and disposable to everyone except them. They will tell you that you need them. They will tell you that you are only safe under their supervision. They will promise to liberate you from all that chains you. And then they will do absolutely nothing for you. Once upon a time, I was a liberal. But liberalism has changed, and I will no longer be a part of an ideology or political party that represents everything that contradicts my values of unity, equal opportunity, personal empowerment, compassion, and love. So I am walking away. And I encourage all of you to do the same. Walk away.
So, yeah. Wasn't it interesting how we mentioned how the media was a part of spreading, these ideas in order to keep people trapped, right, on the left? And again, we look at what Yuri Bezmenov is talking about. We look at what Cleon Skousen was talking about. And that's why tonight was actually initially going to be about the reality that the news is used to indoctrinate us and make us believe things when it's actually so filled with propaganda and lies. But I thought before we do that, I wanted to, because I'm going to tackle two very monumental, massive things going on right now that the news has been covering so much. And I knew that people would have a hard time looking at that until maybe they saw this, because it's such an emotional thing for people. But I mean, like I've told you guys many times, when I left high school, I was very, very much, I had certain ideas that were more conservative, but for the most part, I thought socialism was the answer and the solution. And I didn't believe that people needed, anything more than a bull to action. And then 9 years ago, I just started, thank God, waking up to a lot of realities. And, and then, as time went on, perhaps thanks to the algorithms of YouTube, I started finding more of these voices that agreed with me. And the thing with what he was saying is, so, you have the ideas of classical liberalism where it's about having more and more liberties. But over the last few decades, I got really hugely, thanks to Trudeau Sr., was liberalism shifted into Marxism and socialism, but there's no freedom in those systems. There's no freedom in them. So what a lot of former classical liberals who wanted liberty are finding is now they're moving over away from the left to the right, into libertarianism. And they're looking at it and realizing there's actually way more commonalities in terms of liberties and freedoms with conservatism, okay? Which, it's a huge paradigm shift for a lot of people because they associate conservatism with, really restrictive moral laws and whatnot. And certainly there are moral laws that you'll find in conservatism, but it's not because they're trying to be restrictive, but it's because they're actually good and they help keep a society healthy, as we saw 2 weeks ago when Yuri Bezmenov talked about even the demoralization of a society in order to take it over and subvert it in terms of making it less and less moral. But anyways, that's Brandon Straka. Here's someone else's story. Oh, and anybody making comments, I apologize. I'm just going to play these all first, and then I'll answer everyone's comments afterwards so that everyone gets to be a part of it. But if I keep pausing, it obviously takes too long, and my streams are way longer than they should be.
I'm Ann Davison-Sattler. I grew up in Texas, and becoming an adult there, I made some assumptions when it came to voting and elections. Because my interests were in working with refugees, I wanted to go into crisis management, where people, going into places where people were fleeing from, and I wanted to work with people who were often overlooked in regular society, be that homeless people. I would go out and back then they would collect cans and redeem them for coins and use the money to help themselves. I would work in what was called back then halfway houses for people who were recently released from prison and were trying to return to being contributing members of society. I helped a woman who had recently lost her vision. She was adapting to life. I taught English because I could see the economic and educational opportunities that would provide for people. And I also worked in a UN refugee camp on the border of Cambodia, where people were fleeing civil war, losing limbs and family members from landmines and violence. And to me, they were the epitome of homelessness, people without a home or a homeland to return to. Well, life happened, and interruptions came, and I didn't get to work in that field for my entire career. And now I'm a lawyer, a mom to 2 young kids, and living in Seattle for the past 23 years. And I've come to some realizations, even though I still do some of those same things with my time. I've come to the realization that I had voted Democrat based on the assumptions that I thought that party was one that wanted to help and uplift marginalized populations.
That's what they always tell us.
Access and opportunity to be heard when they normally wouldn't be. But here in Seattle, that's taken a different turn than what I have known it to be. Around 2015 or so, I started having to come up with explanations and answers that were age appropriate to my young kids' questions, basically on a daily basis, because of what they were observing around them. People were starting to live alongside our roadways, and it would just multiply. Like every year there was more and more and more. And the questions I would have to answer, like, why did that man come out of the bushes and yell at us and chase us, to my kids? Why can't we touch that shiny thing in the grass, which was a no? Why is that person sleeping on the sidewalk when we didn't know, obviously, if the person was asleep or passed out, because we didn't know, was the person there because they were addicted, or were they there because they were battling mental illness that was untreated? Did they have both? But these were questions I had to start to address to my kids, because that's the only world that they knew, was that some people were living like this, and they even knew this wasn't right, that something was very wrong, that these people clearly needed help, and yet nothing was being done. So I started to really question, who are the people making these decisions? Because we're spending a lot of money on what's being called homelessness, and yet the problem is growing, and the dollars are increasing, and there's not really much bettering that's being done, and no improvement that's happening in people's.
You'll notice, friends, that political parties that call for more and more taxation in order to provide more and more social services, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Did you know that back in like the early 1900s, at the turn of the 20th century, there was no income tax in Canada? Can you imagine what it would be like if you didn't have to pay income tax? Sure, it's provided as certain things, but the point is, the income tax came to pay off World War I, but then once it got here, we got used to it, and they never got rid of it. Even GST, government sales tax, that was introduced in the 80s, was 7% across the nation. The Harper government, who were conservatives, they had promised to get rid of it, but they reduced it to 5%. So, big thanks. But it's never about figuring out, how can we get some money, solve a problem, and then lower the taxes again so that people can have money for what they think is important. Like myself, I'm very charitable. Like even right now, while I'm laid off and not working, and I'm not collecting CERB, by the way, I'm living off my own savings. I'm still giving to things that I think are valuable. Okay. You won't meet a lot of people that will be able to say that. But if I was able to pay less taxes while I was working, I would be able to give more to the things I thought were valuable, rather than the government take my money out of my pocket and give to things that I don't necessarily agree with, in order so that they can look like the savior of society, which is the goal of Marxism and socialism, which is a false goal, by the way. Government will never be your savior. And I also, it's very interesting. She was mentioning the things about refugees and whatnot. This is the same lie that they tell people all over the world, that government's going to be able to save them, and to just vote in more and more regulatory powers to these governments. And that's what they want. That's what they're deceiving us with.
Lives. And in fact, in 2015, the city of Seattle and King County declared a state of emergency on homelessness. And then they both quickly just did nothing. Nothing. I mean, it's just increased over that time period. And now here we are 5 years later, and in COVID-19 in 2020, and we have people at more risk, right? They're living in these unsanitary, no hygiene access, inhumane, not compassionate conditions. And when I started to come to the realization that back in that UN refugee camp that I'd worked in, those conditions there were more sanitary, hygienic, and humane than we were allowing people to just subsist along the roadways of Seattle. I started to realize that the Democrat Party that I knew had started to move so far left that I didn't recognize it anymore. And as I started to talk about why is this acceptable, why are we spending all this money and not actually seeing benefit for people, why is this occurring, I got a lot of pushback and a lot of intolerance by established power holders in the Democrat Party, that I couldn't ask those questions. And I've even been told that some of them prefer that people live in tents alongside the roadways and not be in FEMA emergency shelter. I've come to the realization that I can't be a part of that anymore. If it means being part of that far left Democrat Party is in Seattle means that you you're not good problem solvers with a lot of tax dollars, because that's what's happening, or you don't know your solution and your approaches aren't working, or you won't admit that they're not working, or you are wanting to capitalize on the status quo by leaving it and using the plight of people to further a political purpose. I don't want anything to do with that. I find that not only unacceptable, but it's unconscionable to me. I want us to be actually doing good work with the tax dollars we are providing for people that clearly need help. And then in the midst of all of that, we have people who can self-care and just need shelter, and they're being overlooked. And by allowing this to continue, we have people who want to take advantage of it, and they're being bad actors in the midst of it. And so this is not a way to move forward to pursue a political agenda. This is a way to alienate people and to shame people and actually be intolerant of saying we require there to be approaches that are actually working and not to try to do something else with the use of the plight of people. They want to demonize business, which is really going to be what we have to carry our load on as we exit COVID-19. We will need to rely on business to help us come out of this crisis that we're in, not demonize them. And they want to use urban decay and the visible destruction of the environment. We spent millions of dollars to restore creek habitat right here in Seattle, and only to allow a few years later people to camp along that creek and use it as their toilet and trash can. When we spent millions of dollars to restore the delicate habitat there, and now it's just wasted. I don't call that being green. I call that being wasteful, and I call that not paying attention to what's going on, or not caring, or again, using it for a political purpose, none of which is acceptable to me. So I've learned that these special type of Democrats that are here in charge, making these decisions in Seattle, I just can't be a part of that anymore. I require there to be more. I want my kids to see a better example of how we problem solve. When we see there's an issue, we step forward and we take care of it. We don't just leave it and let it fester and start to see a way that we can take advantage of it. So I don't know what they're doing here. It breaks my heart what they've done to our city. And they've left me here in the middle, wondering, what are they doing? And frankly, I don't care what they're trying to do with it. I just know I can't follow them. So I've had to walk away and say that there are other ways and better ways to solve problems. And they have to be done for the better of everybody. We cannot allow the quality of life to go down for everyone and people to still be needing help and the cost to continue to rise. This is not the way to move forward. We must evolve as a society, and that means working together. And this is not how it's happening. So I've had to walk away.
True that. True that. Hey, what's up, Alpha? I see your message there. Maybe after this, I'll.
China's blaming the U.S. for this whole virus.
Maybe after I've gone through these videos, you bet. I'll start up Discord maybe.
Hi, my name's Maggie, and this is my walkaway story.
I just want to pause and say, for anyone watching this going, oh, well, who cares? You know, these are all people with white privilege. Their opinion, their perspective doesn't matter. After this, we're going to start looking at other people too. Americans that have left the left because they know that they're actually not having their problems dealt with over there, and they're really just being used as puppets in order to increase their voting bloc.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is a liberal Democratic town. I did not ever question being a liberal Democrat because
many of them are
one,
like
I was born into
5 minutes.
it, and it was natural. Number two, I believed that to be conservative or Republican was to be greedy, narrow-minded, bigoted, and against the environment. I was
That is exactly what they're trying to get everyone to believe about the right. Like the people that think I'm just this racist right-wing radical. It's so sad. In fact, I had this. Oh, it's so funny. I had someone from where I'm living on one of our local Facebook chat groups where everything apparently goes. Someone had posted something silly as usual because that's all they do on there and they're renowned. And I made a comment and they came on and called me a racist because of something and said that I believed that recently from my church, homeless people in First Nations, Native Indian people were the culprits behind the theft. And I know I didn't say that. So I said, I invite you now, please, go find that thread, take screenshots and post them here for everyone to see. They never did. Why? Because I didn't say that. And it's just people, you know, they don't want to hear they don't want to consider your part of the side of the discussion. So they just label you something in order to demonize you and also to silence people. So me, I'm totally secure. I don't care what people think. I don't need anyone's approval or opinion. But a lot of people, unfortunately, don't have that kind of security in their life. So when someone comes out and says, you're a bigot, you're a racist, they clam right up and now they won't share their opinion anymore. And then internally they start to question themselves. Gosh, maybe I am a racist. Maybe I am wrong. And then they say, maybe I really need to start looking at things and believing what that person says. When that person is definitely not someone to be trusted.
firmly entrenched in
GG,
my liberal
dude.
mindset, and I saw myself as morally superior. I always identified with the underdog. I had a sixth sense for finding persecution. I learned from the liberal mindset to see people in authority as persecutors. Every CEO, every police officer was probably a despot. When I got a job at a liberal nonprofit in Tucson, Arizona, also a very liberal town, I started to question being a liberal. This was a direct result of working with liberals and seeing the liberal beliefs played out in real time. I worked in a department of people that saw themselves as the persecuted minority of the organization, also a liberal mindset, to feel like you're being persecuted. Maybe you are, but you're probably not. We often talk bad about everyone else in the organization because they didn't do as much important work as we did. We relentlessly made fun of the CEO because he was obviously evil and greedy. When I interacted with him one-on-one, he was actually very kind, and I really had no specific reason not to support him, but I also didn't want anyone to know this, so I kept quiet because I had to stay in the group. My department focused on teaching people how to grow their own food. I specifically worked on an organic farm, and we received a few really large grants while I worked there, which allowed us to spend a lot of money. I saw my coworkers spend a lot of money for our programs without much oversight at all. It seemed strange to me that we could just buy whatever we wanted because I tend to be very frugal. But I wanted to fit in, so again, didn't say much. But then we bought a top-of-the-line tractor, and we never used it. That's when...
this is what I was talking about earlier. The huge problem with just looking at your tax dollars coming in from your constituents, whether it be from a federal level, a provincial level, or a municipal level, and just thinking it's like allowance from your parents and you can spend it on whatever the heck you want, because at the end of the day, you've still got a roof over your head. Mommy and daddy are still going to pay for your meals and tuck you in at night and buy you toys and stuff. So that $20 you get a week or whatever it is, like when I was a kid, it was $20 a month. Just spend it on candy and comic books or whatever, and just, you know, stuff you can just throw away. And like in where I live, you know, thankfully we apparently have a very low property tax rate compared to other places, but just like awful. We have a huge budget, and they bring in all this money, and it's just like they have like project after project to keep doing, and it's like part of it. Yes, I understand they want to keep municipal employees like the laborers and the construction guys working. I get that, but just. Oh, if only they could just stop spending so much money. And, you know, one of it is like, where should we beautify next? It's like, stop. We're in a recession here. It's COVID, you know, our province is just doing so badly financially. Our town has lost like 60,000 people, which is like half of what our population was. Stop spending money. Take care of the bare essentials for a while until maybe we can find ourselves in a stronger financial position. You know, it's like, it's just so ridiculous. So ridiculous.
Bells and whistles started going off in my head. The person who was supposed to use it never did. It almost seemed like he was scared because we were all very young and inexperienced, and here we have a really expensive tractor and we really don't know how to use it. Whatever the reason, the tractor just collected dust. This wasteful spending is indicative of liberalism. Liberals like to spend other people's money because they like high taxes, and when they do it wastefully. It's very easy to buy an expensive tractor because the government gave us a huge grant, and we actually had to spend the money within a certain time frame or we would lose the money. So there was.
That's right. So you'll have a budget for the year. Let's say it's $100,000. We're just nice round number, easy to work with. $100,000. You don't spend it. You spend $75,000 because you're frugal and you're watching your projects and you're making sure, you know, you're only spending as much as you need to. Next year they say, well, then you only need $75,000. Okay, rather than maybe saving that as surplus and then talking about, you know, lowering the budget for the next year or whatever. And so you have all of this ridiculous expenditure. Like, they did this kind of stuff when I was in the military. They do this kind of stuff in corporations. They do this kind of stuff all the time. It's just ridiculous. And it's awful. They do this stuff in schools.
There's an incentive to waste money. A for-profit business has to be careful about its spending so that its spending doesn't exceed its profits. But when we have other people's money, we can spend it however we want. It's wasteful and it's liberal. Some other things that helped wake me up from this mentality was this mentality of hating the person in charge that we all had. This is liberal to the core. We disliked authority so much that we decided no one should be in charge. So there was a person who had the title farm manager, but everyone silently agreed that she should not have much power. She even agreed to this. But what ended up happening is that she and I did all the work. I was her assistant. So she and I did all the work, and everyone else just did their own thing. Sometimes these people didn't even come to work. Why would they when there was no consequence for their action? When things got hard, they just said they were busy with other projects. I got so fed up and I walked away from being a liberal and this crazy Lord of the Flies mindset.
That's a good analogy.
Again, another liberal, indicative of liberalism. It's Lord of the Flies. It's chaos. The things that they believe don't make sense when played out in the real world. It doesn't make sense to not respect the person in charge. Because then how are things going to run properly? Now, I would have just become an angry person, but while this was happening, I met someone who was reasonable and conservative. He angered me, but he made me think. Long story short, we got married, and when I got pregnant, I was able to leave that job, and I have never looked back. I loved the work I did, but the people I worked with were illogical, unreasonable, and liberal, except one person who I still keep in contact with. So those are the reasons that I left the liberal mindset. I'm not very political, so the Democratic part, it doesn't hold as much weight with me, but the liberal part, they were all crazy, illogical, agnostic. That's a whole nother story. But Brandon, I want to thank you for giving us the platform to speak these stories, and God bless you.
So she's talking to Brandon Straka, of course, of Walk Away, who started the movement. All right, so here is David Rubin. Used to be on the left. We're actually going to watch a video later on. Like, what was the trigger point for him to be like, wait a second, what am I thinking? And friends, hang in there. It was because he was talking to a black man who said to him, there is no systemic racism in America. Okay, right now we're being told it's everywhere. We're being told it's all over Canada. And I think the only systemic racism in Canada might be, because think of the definition of systemic racism. It's where you have an actual system in place to make things different for a certain ethnicity. Okay, so, there's regulations in place to keep people down. There's regulations in place. Or you have, let's see, so you've either got a system in place where the regulations themselves keep people down. What was the other definition I thought of earlier? Anyways, in Canada, we don't necessarily actually have like a system in place that says this sort of person should be, disenfranchised. Although, my goodness, as a white male, every corporate job I've tried to get into where I live, because we do live near a lot of First Nations reserves, I'm asked, the checkboxes of whether I'm Native, whether I'm of a visible minority, male or female, because they want to, if they can, hire those people above, as long as they have the right, qualifications, so that they can then say this is how many we've hired this year or whatever, right? So to look at people and hire based on those things, it's just so gross. So I mean, that's racism, honestly. That's systemic racism, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not a victim. I think I can get ahead as long as I work hard, and at some point, I'm going to catch a break. But the Indian Act in Canada, and the way Native people are treated on the reserves, not on purpose, I don't think, although there is just the fact that they're on these reserves, rather than just being considered like full-fledged Canadian citizens who are the same as us. And so they're free to just leave the reserve. I don't understand all that, but the system itself, it's not like it's made to be racist, but when you give some of these chiefs and their council or whatever all the money, and these guys spend it so poorly and oftentimes hoard it to themselves while everyone else is living just like the worst conditions, like that is abuse. I wouldn't say it's necessarily systemic racism, because it's not done on purpose from the federal government, but it's broken. But anyways, Dave Rubin, homosexual. He was a liberal, now a libertarian. He's got this awesome show, The Rubin Report, and he's talking to another homosexual guy. Here's his story.
My moment was the headline of the New York Times after, I guess it was the first or second Republican debate, where Trump had gone on CNN and talked about how Megyn Kelly was bleeding through her eyes.
First
whatever.
one.
Okay.
I think it was first. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, whatever. But it was the top headline at the top of the New York Times, and I thought, that is so strange. Why is that? To humiliate Trump to some degree? This was just something that you could kind of talk about minimally, but to create an entire narrative over this in order to humiliate him or to get him canceled was the beginning for me of like, oh, there's something else going on. There's a secret history here.
Yeah, so he's realizing, wait, there's actually an agenda from the media to make the right not win.
You mentioned cancel culture before, and then I brought up the charges of misogyny related to American Psycho.
Yeah.
So I just read on your Wikipedia, and if it's on Wikipedia, it's got to be true, that you had the deal for American Psycho with Simon & Schuster, but then because
Yeah, he's the author.
Women of Now, or the Now of Women, or the something, they accused you of being misogynistic.
And I got it.
And then was the book dropped? I mean, this is sort of an early version of cancel culture.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It was.
Clean that story up for me. I got it on Wikipedia.
Look, I had a
You got
deal at
Grammy
Simon
Elise
& Schuster.
here.
A big deal at Simon & Schuster. I turned the book in. This is a long time ago, in December of 1989. And throughout 1990, the book kind of moved through the usual rungs of the ladder that it does through a publishing house. Getting copy edited, we figure out a cover, your editor does some basic editing on it, but there were people in the publishing house who were very offended by American Psycho, usually assistants, young people working in the publishing house. And leaks started happening. Leaks of some of the most violent passages were being sent to the press and certain members of the press. And so suddenly it became a story. And the book hadn't been published yet, but it became a story. And it became more and more controversial the more and more that these notorious scenes were leaked. And of course, out of context they're horrible. And so anyway, the controversy got louder and louder and louder. And yes, kind of like today in a way, Simon & Schuster collapsed and said, we are not going to publish this book because of the outcry in the media. Now, this is another thing that happened then, is that it was actually the corporation that owned Simon & Schuster that demanded the cancellation. It was Gulf and Western, who owned Simon & Schuster, and the head of Gulf and Western did not like the controversy, did not like the fact that his corporation was being blemished by this book, who ordered the cancellation. I knew the head of that company, of Simon & Schuster, quite well, and I knew that he wasn't the one who canceled it, but he was the fall guy. He had to take it. So anyway, that is what happened. It's a happy ending because a better publisher picked up American Psycho and they published it a few months later, and you know, the rest is whatever it is.
Right, so it definitely ends happily and a movie's made and everything
And I have
else.
to say, one thing that's very interesting is that Tammy Bruce was the head of Now, who was the most against American Psycho. She was my nemesis then in 1991, and now...
That's hilarious. I mean,
now she's one of the leading lights, the bright lights on Fox, actually. And so I don't know, I find that kind of ironic in the way that the culture works.
I mean, that fits so much of a lot of the stuff that we've talked about privately, because I've only met Tammy Bruce once. It was at David Horowitz Freedom Center thing, and David Horowitz was a famous lefty, children of communists,
Of course.
Who then became conservative.
Yes.
And at his conference, he did a thing on sort of the new generation of former lefties that have sort of woken up, and it was me, Tammy Bruce, Candace Owens, and a couple other people. So that's the only time I met her, and it's funny, she was opposed to you back then, and here you are. That's actually a great segue for a little political stuff. Where are you politically? I mean, I have a sense of kind of where you're at, and everything these days feels sort of amorphous. But
you know what? I was never a political person. I just wasn't. Maybe it was because I was privileged to a degree and politics just didn't interest me. Why would they? I was a privileged white kid, and moving from high school into college during the Reagan 80s, everything seemed whatever. I mean, I guess I complained about Reagan mindlessly like all of my other kids in my class, and a lot of people took American Psycho to be a
What a coincidence.
critical of the values of the Reagan 80s. And it was critical of some of the cultural values, certainly about greed and about yuppiedom, but I had no beef with Ronald Reagan. I mean, that wasn't part of what that book was about. Some of his iconography is used in the book, but you know, he was just the president during the time that book took place. And then, you know, I was living with someone for a long time who was very invested in politics. I actually ran a couple of gubernatorial campaigns in the 90s, and I got a close-up look to that, and I just hated it. I just hated the whole notion of how it was all played out, and none of it interested me. And it really, and I during the Obama era, everything's fine. I mean, I wasn't really paying attention. Something happened with Trump. something happened with Trump that I think has happened to all of us to one degree or another. Something was announced. And again, another presidential election cycle is coming up, and I'm kind of following it, but suddenly I'm following it because it's very interesting to me how the media is treating the Donald Trump narrative. Now, I'm talking about a media that I had been following closely for 30 years and trusted somewhat. The New York Times, CNN,
Trusted.
New York Times and CNN, all of my life. I read them, and I trusted them, and I believed in them, and it was all, they were, And I began to think that they were missing the story, that they were going off a different path that really wasn't the reality. That wasn't the reality, that there was a new narrative that they were forming. And this began to bother me. And I don't know why.
I hear ya.
I don't know why. I'm nonpartisan. I never saw myself as, I never saw myself really, I think we have this similar trajectory. I think that I was a liberal guy who was gay and was, rightly so.
Yeah.
Rightly so, it was fine. Never stridently, never far left or whatever, but I believed in the good fight on the liberal side. Something happened. I began to see that this side was curdling.
Yeah. Do you remember a moment? Because a lot of people have like the moment. Yeah. What was your moment?
My moment was the headline of the New York Times after, I guess it was the first or second Republican debate where Trump had gone on CNN and talked about how Megyn Kelly was bleeding through her eyes.
I think it was the first
whatever.
one.
Okay.
I think it was first. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, whatever. But it was the top headline at the top of the New York Times. And I thought, that is so strange. Why is that? To humiliate?
Because they
Trump
didn't
to
want
some
him to
degree?
win.
This was just something that you could kind of.
What we might talk about next week is just the reality, like I've already stated. The news media is used as the propaganda arm for this globalist agenda. But the reality is 6 corporations own all of the news outlets that we get our news from. So these 6, because the people owning them all share the same philosophies, they're all a part of this agenda, friends. And so they look at Trump, and because he's a guy that says, America first, we're going to take care of ourselves, we're not going to sell ourselves out to this globalist system, that obviously impedes on their agenda. And so they are doing everything they can to take him out. Anytime in the past you had a Republican win, whether it was George W. Bush, whether it was his father, George Bush Sr., these guys always towed the line for the globalists. They did it in different ways. They did it to maybe less extent. But one way or the other, it was still going that same way. And Trump seems to be the only guy who's seeing it because he's wealthy and being able to brush shoulders with so many of these people, and said, no, I don't like that. And the American people don't like that. And I'm going to give them a different choice. And so that's why he is hated so much. That's why plot after plot after plot, there's something to destroy him and discredit him.
Talk about minimally, but to create an entire narrative over this in order to humiliate him or to get him canceled was the beginning for me of like, oh, there's something else going on. There's a secret history here. And that is how
how's it going, Callie?
To become somewhat radicalized in a way from who I thought I was to where I ended up being. And again, I have to say I'm not a partisan. I still am someone who is loath to vote. I'm in the majority of this country. And yet, what I've noticed...
You didn't go to my dumpy polling station over here, where I'm pretty sure I contracted coronavirus? You weren't there yesterday?
No, I was not there. And I'm not going to be there either. What I found so interesting, and really what white, a lot of it is about how I saw the left begin to disintegrate. Yeah. And a part of the aisle that I thought I was on. I thought I was in that side of the theater. And I realized that I'm not. And I don't want to be on this side of the theater if it is this hysterical, this crazed. And also I really hated the creation of narratives that were obviously not true, that were being used to undermine a legally elected president, whether I liked him or didn't like him. I just thought there was something so distinctly un-American about the way the left was creating their stories that it just began to unnerve me.
Yeah, you know what's super interesting about that David Horowitz, who we just mentioned, when I had him in here, he's a huge Trump supporter, and I asked him, do you have a moment when that happened? And he mentioned the Megyn Kelly bleeding line, because he said for him...
Like, you've got to be asking yourself, friends, if you're on the left, or even if you're a conservative Canadian who has ingested too much CBC, CTV, Global, CFRN, whatever, and hates Trump, why are these gay guys, these gay liberals from the States, why are these women from the States who were liberal, why do they support Trump? You know? Ask yourself that question. If he's so repulsive and evil.
As someone that was a conservative...
Or rather, if the news is correct about him being so repulsive and evil.
But didn't understand the Trump thing. He's like, that moment got it for him because it was basically Trump being like, screw all of you, I play by none of your rules. So that same moment that sort of had you wake up from a media perspective as a lefty, for him as a conservative was like, that was why he loved Trump.
But it's so weird because, yes, the Trump screw all the rules guy is what everyone loves. That's what everybody loves.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that yet on the
exactly,
other side,
Kelly.
a lot of people are horrified by, who would normally love
right,
that
they're supposed to be
in
the
a
rebels,
person.
right?
And yet, because it's Trump, and this is the problem with Trump, and I talk about this again in the book, it is about, I really believe it's about an aesthetic. It's about this guy and what he looks like. And I always have said that if Trump was in the package of a Mitt Romney, it might be more palatable for a lot of people, and we certainly would not have this kind of, like, what is truly, I believe, Trump derangement syndrome.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics...
David Rubin, definitely one of the people you should be listening to, just to give yourself another perspective, you know, on top of the news and whatever you watch. Okay, so here we go. Conservatives of color smash the fake news narrative at Candace Owens' Blexit, LA. So we've got the walkaway movement started by a homosexual white guy, Brendan Strackus, called #walkaway. Candace Owens, who is she? Candace Owens is a black conservative. She herself also left the left back after college. Here she is. She's defending herself from some hearing where I think it was after some shooting. The shooter, this is insane. In his manifesto, he mentioned appreciating some of Candace Owens' perspectives. And so this hearing was all about whether or not conservative voices on social media are the cause of mass shootings. Like, I kid you not, this was all over the news, and this was basically what they were saying, and that these conservative voices were radicalized. These right-wing conservative radical voices were radicalizing people and instigating violence, even though nothing in what they say says go do violence. They're saying, but your hate speech leads to violence, and so should she be criminally, and others held accountable. And the same guy in his manifesto actually said, like, he ascribed to the principles of, like, the Communist Chinese Party or something. So just either a nutcase or, a radical Marxist who agreed with some of her ideas and yada yada. So here's Candace Owens. She's begun what's called the Blexit movement, which means black exit from the left. And it's awesome. But here we go.
We are joined by our love of America.
The misconception is that this party is not the party of diversity, that
I don't want to judge. I think he might be a gay guy.
Only the Democrats are diverse, when in reality, the Republican Party has become way more diverse in where it matters, in the mind. That's where true diversity lies, diversity of thought.
I've been a Republican all my life.
Oh.
Born and raised on the south side of Chicago. And so, being from a Democrat stronghold, I like to consider myself like Blade, you know. I have all of a Democrat's strength, but none of their weaknesses, you know.
Tonight is really about having those conversations that the media refuses to have with us about what's actually going on in our communities. Because I'll tell you, it is not racism that is keeping us out of the American dream.
Exactly.
It's the lies that we've been told that is keeping us out of the American dream. It is us marrying ourselves to a party that does not.
Friends, you got to share this information far and wide. You know, just be bold, be courageous, don't have fear, be willing to have the conversations with friends, share this stuff far and wide, because people have to know that there's an agenda, and that agenda is using the leftists, the Marxists, liberals, whatever, and even unwitting conservatives.
Care about us and is keeping us out of the American dream.
What's happening in the black community is urban legend. It's really urban legend. They hear something, somebody tells them something, and it just becomes ingrained in the community because there's nobody to tell them anything different. You go to the grocery store, everybody around you thinks the same way. You go to work, everybody around you is thinking the same way. If you happen not to think that way, everybody around you gonna jack you up.
Was it harder to come out as a gay man or as a conservative?
It's been harder to come out as a conservative because I didn't lose friends when I came out as gay. I lost friends when I came out as conservative. I was iced out of social circles in New York City. The blowback from the LGBT community has been the most visceral and the most rude and the most hateful.
You know, they've never been able to bully people like myself, and I'm happy to finally see the rest of my, bracket, my ethnicity bracket, those with my paint job, finally grow a set and say, you know what, enough is enough. You guys have been promising me this, you've been promising me that. You show up at my churches, with your fake Southern accents, talking about hot sauce in your purse, telling me you're going to promise me the moon and the stars.
That was a reference to Hillary Clinton. Okay, Hillary Clinton said, I always carry a jar of hot sauce in my purse. Friends, that's despicable. That's racism. Okay, that's stereotyping. That's trying to appeal to these voters, this demographic, in a way that's disingenuous. This woman doesn't carry freaking hot sauce around in her purse. All right, Hillary Clinton does not carry hot sauce around in her purse. She was saying that to get votes. That's despicable. Should want nothing to do with anyone who prescribes to that sort of tactics.
And then nothing gets done. I'm done.
I don't have to tell you guys in this room because we figured it out. We figured out that the left is lying to us. We figured out that liberals are lying to us. We figured out that they are using us to secure votes and to keep themselves in power and to keep themselves rich, right? Minorities have been used in this country. And all of that changes today.
Yeah, I was raised a Democrat. My grandma used to work for the president in El Salvador. And growing up, we were told that the Democrats were for us, the people, and we've always voted Democrat all our lives until President Trump said that he was going to run. We didn't really know who he was, but we saw our choices, and because the choices were not good, we decided to try something new, and thank God that he's more than we expected, and he is actually doing everything that he said that he was going to do, and we appreciate everything that he's doing.
I don't really like Trump.
Now, that woman sounded Hispanic. Weren't we all taught and told to believe that Trump hates Spanish people and Mexicans and he's racist towards them? Why would she like a racist? Let's hear what this guy has to say. Apparently he doesn't really like Trump.
And I'm here because I don't like him as a guy personally, but I'm here because I can accept the truth that comes out of the right's mouth. Even though I grew up a Democrat, I grew up on the left, and this is just a refreshing thing for me personally.
It's really refreshing.
Good for
to see
him.
These young people finally get it. It's an aha moment. You know what I mean? Aha, because let's face it. Some of the people, because they fall for the doctrine and they get triggered. Some of these very same people called me a coon.
Oh,
Uncle Tom.
That is so gross, friends. That's racism. And unfortunately, black conservatives, they get called this stuff all of the time. When we end this stream, I'm just going to go through a list of black conservatives that you should, just see what they're about, see what they're talking about. Why are they black conservatives when it's the Democratic Party that's apparently for black people? And they get called the most nasty, disgusting stuff all the time, receiving hateful messages and death threats, far outweighing any supposed white supremacist, racist remarks being sent to black Democrats, like way outnumbering. And there's even white people from the left that attack these people. You know, it's just so gross. And one thing you should understand, Uncle Tom is used as a derogatory term. Uncle Tom is the good guy in Uncle Tom's Cabin. Or no, wait, what's that book called? I think it's called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Anyways, I digress.
And that's okay, I forgive them. Because now they realize the fire is burning closer to their area.
To tell you the truth, and when you really talk to a lot of black people or a lot of people in general, like, our lives did not get better under Barack Obama. It was very nice that there was this beautiful family in the White House, and it was very nice that there were all the magazine covers and all that. But fundamentally, the things that really needed to change in America did not change. As a matter of fact, some things got worse. And
So the reality is, friends, Barack Obama was what's called a race agitator and a race baiter. And because he's a Marxist, and we're going to look at that closer as we go through this series, because he's an anti-American, he wanted to continue to stoke the fires to cause division so that this agenda could come to be as America imploded on itself. That's why he was all about change, hope and change, hope and change. And the change that he was talking about was not the change that people wanted.
I think that the complete failure of the Obama administration is why so many people are waking up, especially black people. I voted for Barack Obama twice. And I think that Candace said she voted for him twice, and Brandon Tatum voted for him twice. So what is it that you have all of these young black people that voted for the first black president twice, but now we're coming over to the conservative side?
That's so heartbreaking.
What has woken the black community up thus far has been President Trump. He has looked past the media, he's looked past CNN and the fake news outlets and said, you've been voting Democrat 50, 60, almost 70 years. It's gotten you nothing. You're poorer. You're more impoverished. You're more of you are in prison. The family unit has been obliterated. You know, academically, you guys are at the bottom. And this is all thanks to the party that you claim is your champion. Well, nothing's gotten better, clearly. So what do you have to lose? Take a chance on me. And black people start to say, well, you know what? Maybe he's not 100% wrong.
What bothers me now is the lies that they tell us in the community, which creates the hatred and animosity that gets us killed.
That's right.
I'm serious.
That's a hard truth,
when they
friends.
lie to you so much and they get you believing that there's people in your community that want to kill you, they want to harm you, incarcerate, take your freedom away, it's going to make you mad. And the lies that they're perpetuating is causing people to be more aggressive. They pull you over for a traffic stop, you don't want to roll your window down. Oh, no, bro, I ain't got to do this. And they telling people how to disobey police and law enforcement.
He's a former police officer.
Which is causing chaos and confusion.
There's nobody angry in here. Nobody's mad. Hey, look, we don't have anything to be mad about. We're good. We just want to live our lives in peace. You're the ones that are out there protesting, blocking the streets, blocking the freeways where mom can't get her baby to the hospital because you mad. What you mad about? You live in the United States of America. Come on now.
Freest nation.
So what brings you here today? I see your sign. What does your sign say?
All right, so my sign says, Candace thinks you're too poor for Congress.
And what does that mean?
This was based on her tweet to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, where she said she was irresponsible and untrustworthy because she had trouble affording her new apartment in D.C. And I just thought it was very elitist to criticize her for not being able to afford rent in two of the most expensive cities in America. You know,
oh, come on, dude.
School teacher going to be able to run for Congress if if you're going to be immediately put down because of your finances, personal finances, you know?
You think Candace was coming from an elitist place when she said that?
I felt so.
Do you think Candace has, she didn't come from a wealthy background. She's not necessarily, the richest person, the most privileged person. She did have some things to overcome herself. Do you think that plays a role and that should be relevant in this conversation?
That's actually a very good point. That might actually change my opinion, really. But I don't know. I just felt she just has really an excuse to attack socialism. You know, it was really more of like a talking point than it was like a direct insult.
you look at, the mainstream media, they're constantly bashing Trump and Republicans and all this kind of stuff, racist, all that kind of thing. But the thing is that if you're not really into politics at all, you're just going to get that as your message, and you're just going to assume,
That's right.
Republicans, conservatives, they're just racist. Right?
Well, you're being indoctrinated,
they don't want the best
friends.
for me. While conservatives, the message really is we want to shrink federal government so
Yes.
that the power can really belong and move
In the
towards
hands of the
at a
people,
localized
yes.
level.
More government sounds appealing, even though it ends up hurting us in the end. And I think what this movement is creating is more people who are countering that message and making it more appealing to young people.
Well, I'm a social worker. I have a degree in social work, and so I've seen it firsthand where they want to give you so much, and it's allowing us not to really rise up above that. So it's all about, they'll say, here's your helping hand and more, whereas I'm all about, here's a helping hand, but I also want you to help you up as well.
That's right.
And in the community that I worked in social work, I just felt like there's so many disparities, and there's just putting a Band-Aid, and they're not really solving the problem. And to us, in the black community, you think, okay, well, they're paying for my housing, they're paying for my food, but it's like Jesus. He had to show them how to fish. He's not just giving them fish. You're going to run out. You got to figure it out.
I do feel that
I don't think that's in the
Democrats have made
Bible.
more of an effort regarding race relations. They don't try to ignore race by saying, "Oh, I'm colorblind." Everybody has the same opportunities, even though that's factually inaccurate when it comes to things like prison sentencing. People get, if you're black, you're more likely to have a longer
To
sentence.
be fair, wasn't that mostly from like Bill Clinton, 3-strike rule, super predators? Wasn't that kind of done at that time by the Democrats?
You're right, very right. And actually, I'm very happy about the bipartisan criminal justice reform that was passed. I'm really happy about it.
So what are the hopes of the black?
So the criminal justice reform, Trump and his administration were a big part of that, friends. And it was to reform the system so that people that were in prison on petty crimes and then put in there for like life because of 3 strikes were able to get out. And sure, yeah, sometimes repeat offenders, it's indicative of them just being a piece of crap that are a danger to society. But a lot of these people weren't actual violent criminals. It was just like 3 times caught with dope. And I don't think people should be smoking marijuana. But I mean, to go to life for prison in the state of California because you've been caught with dope 3 times is horrible. So he was a big part of that. I get people all the time upset with me because, I'll post something where, it's pro-Trump. It's not because I'm his lapdog or anything, but it's because I understand he's against the globalist agenda. He's in a position where he's slowing that agenda, stopping it, maybe even bringing it back a few years, maybe even decades, because they want it so bad that if he gets voted out this November, which I don't think he will, I think it's going to be Trump 2020, we're going to stampede onwards towards this globalist agenda. And so that's why I'm so pro for him. But people will, accuse me of being a racist or an idiot or whatever. And I'll say, well, tell me what's so bad about him. And they have nothing. They don't know. They just repeat the talking points. Oh, he's a racist. He's a racist. But I mean, a lot of black people and black families benefited from that prison reform that, like this dude said, had the systems were put in place originally by Democrats. You can actually watch Biden back in the 90s arguing vehemently for this system. And he also, under his administration, they've had, some of the best economic turnaround that we've seen in decades. Lowest unemployment for black communities, highest wage earnings averages for black people. So, and of course, that also flows off to every other ethnicity, but it's just, it's just media lies. They want to focus on stuff so that you don't see the truth, so that you're not in favor in this. And it's the same in Canada, where the Liberal governments, the NDP, they keep telling us, they have the solutions. They don't. They don't have the solutions. In fact, they're destroying our economy.
The movement, bigger picture down the road, what do you think can happen to the Black and Latino voting communities, along with pretty much anyone else who's been apolitical the last few years.
I think what's going to happen is those percentages that we're seeing what, over 90% blacks vote Democrat and then over 67% Hispanics vote Democrat. I think that we're going to see a big shift in that, especially when we're looking now and seeing that the approval rating of President Trump is over 50% among Hispanics, which is huge because, as we know, the whole issue with immigration has been only really a polarized issue with this administration because in previous administrations they were upholding the very same policies. So why are they doing that? Well, maybe it's because, according to PWHispanic.org, Hispanic Americans, specifically Mexicans, are the largest voting minority. Ding, ding, ding. Let's go ahead and make them single-issue voters, and then we have our cat in the bag for 2020.
You're watching
Wow, smart girl.
Univision, and they're telling you how bad Donald Trump is, and they're telling you that Donald Trump is going to come and knock on your door, and you're going to go back to Mexico. I had so many people tell me when they found out that I voted for Trump. I've been a lifelong Republican, why wouldn't I? But people were telling me that I was going to get deported, and I thought, where am I getting deported to? I'm an American citizen. And I think the biggest misconception you get from them is they're telling you the narrative, which is a false narrative. It's fake news.
We do not believe the fake media. We do not believe in anything the Democrats are saying. We believe strongly that Americans should always come first.
When a lot of people think about illegal immigration, we don't realize that working class black people are affected by illegal immigration the most. These are the jobs that are the first to get taken, which is so funny to me.
One of the reasons, friends, they want all of these illegal immigrants to come in is because if they can, like in Canada, it's crazy. They've got these plans, and they say it's so that they can kind of like spread around the workforce so that your needs or whatever are being met equally. But they bring people in and they remind them again and again, hey, we're the liberals. Hey, we're for you. Hey, we're the ones helping you here. We need you to move to this community here, this small rural community where they vote historically conservative. Yeah, we need a bunch of you to live there. And so, and by the way, when you get there, have a bunch of kids. So, and soon, we're going to be fighting for some sort of amnesty and voting rights for you. We're going to make you citizens as quickly as possible because we want you voting in the next elections. So really what it's about is bringing in more voters. And I think it was Ann Coulter. Some of you may hate that person, but that's unfortunate. You got to just look into what she's saying. If it makes sense and it's true, well, that's reality. But she was talking about how the demographics are changing, the voting demographics are changing to the point where you'll never have conservatives voted in again just because they're completely outnumbered. But that's happening in Canada too. And if you just keep letting people in, like in Canada, they want it to be between 300 and 400,000 people a year legally. But what about the illegal ones that are coming in? I think we're getting something like 40,000 a year. And so if you can get these people dispersed all over the nation into different ridings and whatnot, just totally shifting the way people are voting. So down in the States where you've got movements like Blexit, Walkaway, and even, I think they call it Jexit, where Jewish people who have been Democratic for decades are leaving because they realize the Democratic Party hates Israel and promotes anti-Semitism and everything. They're losing voters. And so if they can get more and more people into the country, then when they have their chance and power or whatever, or through Congress, as they have more congressmen and whatnot, they can change things so that they can turn those people into voters.
That I see all of these black Democrats running around the cable news networks, basically advocating for open borders. And they're supposed to represent black people, but they don't represent me, and they don't represent a lot of the people that live in these communities that are devastated by it.
We see the correlation of the drug running that's happening in our communities.
And people say, oh my gosh, you don't want illegal immigrants and you must be racist. It's like, no, it's because our boat is sinking, okay? If you go down on a cruise ship and you get in a life raft and it says maximum occupancy 16 people, and you let in 2 more, and then you let in another 2, meanwhile, people are, stabbing holes in the dinghy and it's sinking badly and it's taking on water. You don't keep letting people in. Your nation has to be strong enough so that it can sustain the people in. In Canada, each immigrant that comes in and costs I forget how much it is. It's a lot of money. It's expensive because of all the social services that are afforded. And so they make we're talking like just legal immigrants. Okay, legal immigrants, especially with the systems where it's like you come in and now you can bring in your whole entire family of dependents, okay? And you yourself are making $20-something thousand a year, and there's no way you can actually afford everyone. And so the people just become wards of the state and completely reliant on social services. It ends up per person costing so much more money. And so when they say, well, we need to bring in these people to increase the workforce, we need to bring them in order to offset those who are dying off or in need of, going in to collect a Canadian pension plan. We need more people in here in order to pay into those systems. That doesn't make any sense when it's a deficit. When you're bringing in people who cost you more than they actually pay in taxes, and then every one of those excuses falls apart. So it's not about racism, it's about fiscal responsibility. And another thing, there's an excellent video out there about what's called brain drain, where you're taking, you set your standards, you say, okay, we only want skilled laborers, or we only want doctors, we only want pharmacists, we only want dentists, whatever. And so you bring people in, and it's basically, I don't mean to put anyone down when I say it's like the cream of the crop of another nation. So you no longer have, the people that could be helping that parent nation, become a better, more wonderful place, a stronger place. No, you're taking those people and bringing them here, and then now you have to send more and more, care in terms of like federally, the government, is constantly basically donating to nations all over the world who are not on par, right? So I mean, it's just costs more and more money, and it's ridiculous. Now I don't blame people for wanting to leave many of these nations. They come to Canada because they realize it's one of the freest nations in the world. But anyways, let's continue.
I mean, you had Jesse Rojas up there, who's the founder of Lexit, who's literally in a wheelchair because of a drive-by shooting. He can tell you firsthand that within these lower-income communities, that gang culture is very prevalent. How do the gangs get power? It's via drugs. What causes the turf war? Fighting over drug territory. Where are the drugs coming from? Oh, I don't know, 99.8% are coming from Mexico. And yes, there's a correlated issue with an open border and these drugs coming into this country.
Thank you, President Trump, for putting the American agenda first, because we really need a wall, and it's all about the American people. Thank you, President Trump.
I want to thank you, Trump. I've been a huge supporter even before you ran for president. I used to say I was going to be the next Donald Trump as a kid. And, I want to say MAGA, and I love what you're doing.
I love my country, and I love my President Donald Trump.
I love you, President Trump.
President Trump, we love you. We support you.
I served under Ronald Reagan in the United States Air Force. I'm a former peace officer, and I own a small business. I loved Ronald Reagan, but now it's a toss-up. Who's better? Is Reagan going to ultimately be the best president, or is Donald J. Trump going to be the best president?
Amazing. We are bombarded by lies, propagandized constantly. And there are actually people out there having the conversation of, is Donald Trump greater than Abraham Lincoln? Can you imagine that? Abraham Lincoln, like he was talking about Ronald Reagan, which a lot of people hate Ronald Reagan, Reaganomics. But no, people are even comparing him to, having done more than Abraham Lincoln. Like, that's insane. What do I think on it? I don't know. I'm not going to look into it. I don't care. But I'm just putting this out here to let people know the media is lying to us, and people are leaving the left in droves. Legsit, I suppose, is a Latino exit of the left.
All I know was what I grew up around were Haitians, African American. So my parents, they both came over here from Haiti. My dad is a strong believer in working hard. His work ethic paved the way for him. He had his own business. He didn't want anybody to control him. He wanted to work and provide for his family, which he did. Really good family, but we can't really discuss politics like that. I was told vote Democrat. And I didn't know why. I didn't question it. Everyone around me was doing it. I didn't have a brain at that time to think for myself.
It's usually how we operate. People tell us what to do, so we do it.
I wasn't informed or even educated on what the beliefs were between, the parties. So I worked in this Democratic campaign where I was volunteering. It was a lot of manipulation going on. They know most of the people that they were reaching out to weren't educated anyway. They would go into the low-income communities. They barely speak any English, and it was just using them to get them to vote. And when I started seeing what was going on behind the scenes, they were saying one thing, but it was something totally opposite from what they were saying to the people. And it was a lot of manipulation going on. So I was like, this is not what the people need. I literally told them, you guys are the devil. And I walked away. And then I called my dad the same night and I was like, Dad, I don't want to be a Democrat anymore. And he laughed and he said, oh, my baby has a brain now. So he was always conservative. I just never knew because he was very, quiet about it. It grieves me that they're still oppressed. They're enslaved, not knowing that there's freedom on the other side. So I want them to know if you want it, if you want a better life for yourself, for your children, and whoever, you can do it. You can educate yourself, and networking with others that are like-minded is very important. If I can make it, you can make it.
Wow.
So this is not a typical video that I would normally post, but I feel like it is far more important and something that needed to be addressed. So a little bit about me. My name is Tori Hadley. I am 19 years old and I am a sophomore at BYU in Idaho. I major in international
Just got
studies,
doxxed.
minor in economics, and I study human rights and advocacy. I was born and raised in San Diego in a very liberal town. When I got to high school, I was very socially constructed to believe that blacks are supposed to be Democrats. Then I got to college and everything changed. I started digging deep, was actually being immersed in politics, and I was able to really formulate my own opinion based on facts and realized that I had been lied to and tricked my entire life. I have to tell you guys a secret that's probably going to offend a lot of you and probably confuse most of you too. Black people aren't Republicans, Tori. Well, I am. I know being a Republican is very offensive today and punishable by being canceled. Before you dislike this video and unsubscribe and comment about how much you hate me, how I'm racist, and thrust my name down there, watch the video. And then you can do whatever you want. Unsubscribe, dislike it. I don't care, but just watch the video. When we think of equality and freedom, people tend to associate that with the Democratic Party, which in reality is completely wrong. Ever since it was founded in 1829, the Democratic Party has fought against every free major civil rights act. The Democratic Party defended slavery, started the Civil War, opposed Reconstruction, and founded the Ku Klux Klan. But that's not something you will learn in school because guess what? Liberals run the education system. The Republican Party was founded in 1854.
And we already learned from our last episodes, friends, that that's the Marxist agenda, to take over the schools and indoctrinate the children for at least a generation. But I mean, they've had several generations now. That's why we're so far down the hole that we are. It's just they've gotten better at boiling the frog slowly. So, okay, probably familiar of the cuisine in French where you have the delicacy of boiled frogs, frog's legs or whatever. You put the frog in the water. And if the water is boiling, the frog jumps out. So what you do is you put him in there where it's nice and lukewarm or whatever, and he gets comfortable, and you turn up the heat very slowly so that he gets used to it again and again because of the way a cold-blooded reptile's circulatory system works. And before they know it, they're boiling to death and they die inside the pot. That is where the term boiling the frog comes from, okay? So after the fascism we saw with Hitler and the socialist fascism of Mussolini and the dictatorships of Japan, where things just very quickly, they just took over the nations, and we can look at that and go, oh my gosh, that's really dangerous. And what we've seen with the Soviet Union, what we've seen in China, it's it's not very easy, but it's fairly easy to see when things are happening quickly and go, whoa, I don't like this. This is wrong. But if you can boil the frog slowly, over years, decades, through generations, the people just are so acclimatized and they accept while their freedoms are eroded. And that's where we are. The frog is nearly done here in Canada.
Or as an anti-slavery party. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. Anti-slavery party. And their mission was to abolish slavery completely in the Western Territories. 7 Democratic justices voted in favor of slavery, and 2 Republican justices opposed it. And this leads us to the Civil War in 1861 to 1865. Do you guys remember that great commander-in-chief that freed the slaves? Abraham Lincoln. Guess what? And 6 days after the Confederate Army surrendered, John Wilkes Booth, a Democrat, assassinated him. The Vice President Lyndon Johnson assumed the position as president, and he was a Democrat. Luckily, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were still passed because of universal Republican support. And because of this, 22 Black Republicans were able to serve in the US Congress. Democrats didn't elect any Black people in Congress until 1935. So this Reconstruction occurred from 1865 to 1877, and that's because federal troops came in to grant Blacks power. After they left, Democrats took back their power in the South. White supremacy was reestablished, and laws were put in place to restrict Blacks once again. Black codes, taxes, and literacy tests, all used to subvert Black citizens. And this was all done by fear and terror from the Ku Klux Klan. And the founder of the KKK was Nathan Bedford Forrest, who, lo and behold, was a Democrat. Idiots! Eric Foner, who himself was a Democrat, said, in effect, the Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party. Really? What makes you say that? That's so odd. Wow. Then, the only opposition that came to the landmark Civil Rights Act in 1964 came from the Democrats. But the Republicans were the ones that were able to get the extra votes to get this law passed and truly free Black people in America and end segregation. So when the Democrats' efforts failed to enslave Black people, they had to come up with a new tactic. Since Black people are now able to vote, they might as well get them to vote Democrat.
Wait a minute.
Here is the irony of it all. President Lyndon B. Johnson, who was in the House from 1963 to 1969, had this to say about the Civil Rights Act. Go ahead and read it. I'm not gonna say it.
Oh my, I'll have those N-word voting Democratic for the next 200 years. Wow. Just because it's a meme doesn't mean it's true. I'm sure if you went, you would find the sources, friends. It's called research. Real home of racism. Like, listen to her spiel here and all the research. I've already heard all this before, by the way. It's thoroughly documented, and we're going to play a documentary later on in this series that goes through all of this. So I already know all this is true. But yeah, she's clearly not just throwing up fake stuff that some guy on Reddit put together to try and make Black people vote Republican. The Republican Party was founded specifically to abolish slavery. Oh, all right. She already talked about that.
Go ahead and read it. I'm not gonna say it. This is a quote from Carol Swain. Democratic Party prospers on the votes of the very people it has spent much of its history oppressing. Democrats falsely claimed that the Republican Party is the villain, when in reality, it's the failed policies of the Democratic Party that have kept the Blacks down.
It was all a lie.
But Tori, all of this was years ago. The Democratic Party has changed. Well, no. Don't get me wrong. I have tons of friends and family members that are Democrats, and they are good people, but the ideologies they support are not helping the Black community.
Exactly.
These are statistics that I found from Candace Owens that get no coverage, that are very disturbing, that do not get talked about. 75% of Black boys in California don't meet state reading requirements. In 2016, in inner cities like Baltimore, within 5 schools, none of the students were found to be proficient in math or reading. The single motherhood rate in Black communities was at 23% in the 1960s and is at 74% today. More Black babies are aborted than born in New York City. Whether you are pro-life or pro-choice, it is evident that Planned Parenthood is targeting Black women. But that's not something you'll hear on the media because it doesn't fit the left's agenda. And these issues were all because of Democratic policies. Policies put in place to protect us. But that protection was just disguised as oppression. And this is where you have to be very perceptive of the media you are being fed every single day. It comes in a form of fear constructed by the left. These politicians use these terrible crimes that happen to innocent people as ways to gain the black vote. It's happened before from the Democratic Party. Fear tactics were used by the KKK to suppress us in the past. Why is this new news? They make us feel afraid, make us feel oppressed, and make us feel like we don't have a place in this country. And they mock the very existence of our ancestors that bled and died so we could stand here today and be free. And how do we react when they use these fear tactics every 4 years to get our vote? We allow them to make us feel like victims. Exactly what the left wants. They swoon in and promise that they can save us as long as we vote for them. But that protection was just disguised as oppression. The left does not care about black people. They care about votes.
Structure of the Negro community, it's controlled by the white liberal.
Let's take Hillary Clinton for
That was Malcolm X, by the way.
example. A white liberal who knows absolutely nothing about black history, claims she keeps hot sauce in her purse, and has a Beyonce concert.
Who usually poses as the friend.
I think she's actually trying to just get our vote, guys. And then we have Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. He said something
Creepy
along the
Joe.
lines of, if you have a problem figuring out whether or not to vote for me or Trump, you ain't black. Wow, Joe. You have my vote. Please don't take my black card. We gotta talk about Obama. With his 8 years in office, 13 million more people were on food stamps, and 8 million more people were living in poverty. But it's okay because he's black and he understands us, right? And before COVID-19, 14 states had record low unemployment rates under the Republican president, Donald Trump. Facts tell truth. Before you blindly follow behind a crowd, do your own research. Formulate your own opinion, not off of what's popular, but off of what's right. The problem with our society is we don't take the time to truly educate ourselves, and we allow people to have power over our mind. I want to see an actual change in the black community, and that is not going to happen until we stop allowing ourselves to be controlled and manipulated. I will not be victimized by a political party that oppressed our ancestors and is trying to oppress us today.
Wow. Hey. Yeah, that was huge. Huge. Okay, so here's Officer Tatum. You saw him at the Blexit rally there. I think this will be.
About the Officer Tatum store. The Officer Tatum store. Get the merch link in the description section.
This will be the last
president, and y'all know I had to wear the Don shirt today when I talk about the president of the United States of America. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. The speech, the police reform executive order he signed today was absolutely brilliant. It was brilliant. And I'm so glad the president came out with the tempo and tone and he said what he said. And I'm not going to play the full clip here. Maybe I'll link it in the description section. But the president started from the top, went all the way to the end, and there's no reason that any person with a connected cognitive brain stem will say, I don't like that man, because he killed it. Now, let me explain to you why I say this. The president started at the beginning, meeting with the families of individuals who felt that their children were killed by police officers in an unjustifiable manner. Whether it's through police brutality, unjustified shootings, whether it's legitimate or not is irrelevant at this point. The president of the United States met with those people, gave them a voice. Then he not only gave them a voice, he went out and signed an executive order to actually do something about it. Now, we all know on a federal level, he don't have a lot that he can do, but what's in his power, he did it. To ban chokeholds, unless it's life and death situation, was huge to me because I was worried he was going to come out and be an SJW, but you know Trump always come through. But banning chokeholds have been banned. Many departments around the country, especially in the Tucson Police Department that I worked for, chokeholds have been banned unless it's life or death. And I'm glad he put the caveat on there because if it's life or death situation and you got to do what you got to do, then all things are acceptable at that point. So I'm glad that the president went down that path. I'm glad he said that. Now, creating a database to log or to hold police departments accountable, many police departments already do this. But to standardize this, to help police departments rise to the highest occasion, rise to the best of their ability, I don't have a problem with that. I think police departments should be transparent. There's a lot of them that are, but there may be some that aren't. And if you ain't transparent at this point, 2020, you need to step your game up. And I love the fact that he went on and spoke highly of police in America. Not because he's trying to pander to his base, because it's the truth. Most police officers in this country are doing the right thing. They're heroes. They run to danger when you're running away, and they don't even get paid that much. How do you know, Brandon? Because I didn't get paid that much. I was lucky to have a paycheck that wasn't putting me in a position where I'm going check to check to check to check to check. A little bit of overtime, maybe I have $100 of breathing room. Police officers do this stuff out of the kindness of their heart, out of the conviction that God has given them, not because of anything to do with money or even the way people treat them. But the president spoke on that, and I thought it was brilliant. He obviously has been pro-police this entire time, but he didn't go too far to the pro-police side. He said, look, I acknowledge what happened. We're going to make things happen to the best of my ability. We're going to support the police officers, and we're going to come together as a country. What more can you ask for? And then, in Trump fashion, y'all know how Trump do it. Y'all know how Trump. That's why I love him. That's why I voted for him, and I'm going to vote for him again. Trump took the time to methodically go through his track record. Bang, 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 bang. And then he said, Joe Biden and Obama could have done something, but they did nothing. Fact. They could have done something about police brutality, all the things that these Democrats claim that they are advocating for, but they did nothing. President Trump had to step in and do something. Then he touted about the unemployment levels at record lows, employment levels at record high. He talked about the black community because people say he's the most racist president. The black unemployment was lowest in history. Hispanic unemployment was lowest in history. And female unemployment was lowest in 60 years. Touting them stats. Then he goes out and said HBCUs. This is big in the black community. I don't know how any black person wouldn't vote for Trump after hearing this, especially when you hear it from the horse's mouth. HBCUs will come back to the president or come back to the United States government every year looking for money. President Trump gave them a long-term payment where he supported the historically black colleges over a large amount of time or a long amount of time and with more money. What president has done that? Oh, not the first black president. He didn't do it. Then he talked about opportunity zones, $100 billion worth of investments into these minority areas. What more can you do? Then he talked about First Step Act. Myself, Candace Owens, and a few others actually went down to Capitol Hill to lobby for the First Step Act because we felt like it would be invaluable to help all Americans, especially black Americans who are in prison because of Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, and the rest of them Democrats. I ain't gonna go down that path. I'll make another video on that. Down the list, boom, boom, boom. The economy, the best that it has been in decades. The stock market breaking records every time you turn around. Before this scamdemic, the president had touted the best numbers any president has had in a very long time. And he's pro-American, and he's pro-God, and he's pro-law enforcement, and he's pro-American safety, supporting the borders. What more can you ask for from a president? Then he finished it off, like my boy ABL said, with a little bow on top. And he talked about reuniting America. He spoke about coming together. He spoke about this is our time where we can have legitimate conversations and we can stop all of the BS on both sides and we can come together. I love the fact that the president did that. They claim he's a divider in chief. He's a uniter in chief. You know why? Not just word, but deed. The man has done everything he said he was going to do. My only criticism is the scamdemic. Outside of the scamdemic, President Trump has been whooping them. And these Democrats have no solutions. None. None. What can they say?
I just wanted to share that, guys, to just show one more person who left the left and is a conservative supporting Trump now. Former officer Tatum here was also a Marine veteran before he became a police officer. One more guy here. This is Kingface. I guess he's a rapper or something.
So why are we focused on the things that don't matter? That goes to show you they don't want to see change. They don't want us to get better. Because if you want to get better, you would talk about those problems. How can we stop them from killing each other? Well, create jobs, create opportunity, get money and funding to create. Because if we wasn't spending all this money on illegal immigration, because we spend over $600 million a year in having and aborting illegal immigrants' babies. So
this is an interesting conversation. It's 30 minutes long. I highly recommend you put it in your save list and try and watch it. Why is this black guy wearing a MAGA hat if Trump is just this awful racist dude against black people, you know? It's because what we're being told are all lies. And this is why people are leaving the left. Oh, here we go. This is the moment that Dave Rubin had his mind completely changed. So Dave Rubin, he was a liberal homosexual man, and he has left the left, and now he identifies as a libertarian homosexual man.
So, but you wouldn't not acknowledge that there are some systemic issues.
Give me an example. Tell me what you think the most systemic racist issue is. What is it?
Well, I would say that because black people in most cases, in many cases, were descendants of slaves, that racism as an institution, that it just, a certain amount of it just exists.
2015? Give me the most blatant racist example you can come up with right now.
I think you could probably find evidence that, in general, cops are more willing to shoot if the perpetrator is black than white.
What's your basis for saying that? Last year...
Well, look, I know a lot of people would say, look what's going on in Chicago.
I know what they would say. I'm talking about what the facts are. 965 people were shot by cops last year and killed. 4% of them were white cops shooting unarmed blacks. In Chicago in 2011, 21 people were shot and killed by cops. In 2015, there were 7. In Chicago, which is a third black, a third white, and a third Hispanic, 70% of the homicides are black on black. About 40 per month, almost 500 per year last year in Chicago, and 75% of them are unsolved. Where is the Black Lives Matter on that? The idea that a racist white cop and shooting unarmed black people is a peril to black people is BS. It's complete and total BS. And the reason for these so-called activists saying this is the assumption that racism remains a major problem in America. The media, CNN, especially MSNBC, runs down whenever a black cop shoots somebody, and it's some march on Washington. It's ridiculous.
They means white cop.
Black people, half the homicides in this country are committed by and against black people. Last year there were 14,000 homicides. Not talking about suicides, I'm talking about homicides. Half of them were black, 96% of them black on black of that 7,000. Where's the Black Lives Matter people on that?
So there's where you would say that this is purely because of social justice. This is purely because they want ultimately for people to be angry enough to just keep voting Democrat.
That's right. And where's the evidence of a lack of social justice? When a black suspect is killed by a cop, believe me, the media's on it, people are watching it, and justice will, for the most part, occur. In Baltimore, where Freddie Gray was killed, Freddie Gray died in a van, I shouldn't say was killed, died in a van.
Yeah.
You have a city that's 45% black. City council is 100% Democrat. The majority of city council is black. The top cop at the time was black. The number 2 cop was black. The majority of the command staff is black. The mayor is black. The AG is black. And yet here we are talking about racism. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
So it's funny, I find myself caught in between this a little bit as a liberal where I want to always try to defend the other. So in this case, the other being black people, I'm always sympathetic to that. And that, at the same time, I hear you laying out a pretty solid case.
Well, these are just the facts. I'll tell you something else, too. There was just a study, University of Washington, and it turns out cops were more reluctant, more hesitant to pull the trigger against a black suspect than a white suspect, probably because of the fear of being accused of racially profiling and the fear that the civil rights establishment was going to come down on them. So if anything, whites are more likely to be shot by a cop under certain circumstances than a black person. And in the last 30 or 40 years, the percentage of suspects killed by cops who are black has declined 75%. However, the percentage of whites killed by cops has flatlined.
Yeah.
And so, if anything, people are more concerned about shooting black people for fear that they're going to be called racist. And almost every one of these incidents, whether it's Eric Gardner in New York, who died because he was selling Lucy's and resisted arrest, whether it's Tamir Rice in Cleveland, who was twirling around the gun, whether it's Michael Brown in Ferguson, who had just committed a strong-arm robbery, almost every one of these incidents involved somebody resisting arrest. Why don't you just do what the police tell you? My dad said, when I get pulled over, have my hand at 10 o'clock, have my hand at 2 o'clock, say yes, sir, say no, sir, make sure my paperwork is in order, and if I feel the cop is mistreating me, get a badge number and deal with it later on. If Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and Obama and the whole group of them told black people to do that, we'd have a lot fewer of these things to deal with in the first place.
Yeah. All right, so I'm with you. I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying here. So as a black conservative then, who now you've laid out your case there.
But you haven't laid out yours. I asked you to name
holds his feet to the fire.
White cops going after black people, and I told you, gave you the facts for that. So that's nonsense. So you must have something else. What else is it? If you think racism remains a problem in America, give it to me.
Well, I think it remains a problem.
Give it to me.
It may not be systemic in that it's not like you're not being hired because you're black. There's no systemic reason, legal reason that exists, that kind of thing. But I think that racism as a general theory exists.
I need some specifics. You gave me the white cop thing. What else? Give me another example where you think is a problem.
Well, as a black conservative, tell me how do you get people to come around?
You're the one who made the assertion that you think racism remains a major problem in America. I asked you to give me an example. You gave me white cops going after blacks. As far as I'm concerned, you didn't hold it up very well. What's the other argument you have? What's the other thing?
Well, I don't know that it's systemic in the sort of macro sense.
I'm not mad. I just want to know what it is you're talking about.
That's exactly what. Believe me, that's 100% why I wanted to have you.
Blacks
here.
are not getting into school. BS. We have we have affirmative action. So a black person with an SAT and a GPA of X will get into a school faster and easier than a white person with an SAT or a GPA of X. And if going to school is a route to the middle class, you can make an argument that blacks have an easier route to the middle class. If you're talking about about poverty, the poorer you are, the more accessible loans and grants are for you. The problem, the biggest burden that black people have, in my opinion, again, is the percentage of blacks, 75% of them, that are raised without fathers. And that has every other social negative consequence connected to it. Crime, not being able to compete economically in the country, being more likely to be arrested, that's the #1 problem facing the black community. And when I hear people tell me about systemic racism or unconscious racism, I always say, give me an example, and almost nobody can do it.
So the family stuff. So I'll follow your logic there on the family stuff. What can actually be done about that then? I mean, because that's a big
reverse the welfare state. In 1890, 1900, you look at census reports. A black kid, believe it or not, was slightly more likely to be born to a nuclear intact family than a white kid. Even during slavery, a black kid was more likely to be born under a roof with his biological mother and biological father than today. What's happened is we launched this so-called war on poverty in the 60s, where literally Lyndon Johnson sent people knocking on doors. I lived in the 60s, and people knocked on doors apprising women of their availability to welfare, provided there was no man in the house. And we went from 25% of blacks being born outside of wedlock in 65 to 75% right now. And you look at how much money that we spent on welfare, and the lines are parallel. It was a neutron bomb dropped on this country, not just on the black community, but on people in general. At one time, only about 5% of whites were born outside of wedlock. Now 25% of whites are born outside of wedlock. I was in college in 1970, and there was a report called the Moynihan Report, The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. It's written by a liberal, by a man who became a Democratic senator from New York. And at the time, 25% of black kids were born outside of wedlock. He said, my God, this number is horrific. If we don't do something about it, it could get even higher. Well, fast forward, 25% of white kids are now born outside of wedlock. It is the #1 problem in this country, and what we've done, in my opinion, is we've economically incentivized women to marry the government, and we've allowed men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And now we have this.
Mullen's Noel Kitchen.
And, I mean, gosh, like, all the truth there, it's overwhelming. It's completely contrary and contradictory to what we're told we're supposed to be believing, And here's this black conservative guy laying it out with such specificity and proficiency that his liberal talk show host, Dave Rubin, is now libertarian and has walked away as well from the left. And the things that he was talking about with LBJ and the destruction of the family, incentivizing women to not try and stay with the father of the child because then they can get welfare, rather than talk to his folks because you're in a community together, talk to his friends and pressure the guy to do what's right, which is man up and take care of your freaking child. They were incentivizing the women to raise the kids on their own, which of course is not is not your best and ideal situation. But this is, again, looking back at the agenda of Marxists, socialists, globalists. This is what they wanted, and it's still what they want. So we should not be surprised here. I think this is going to be our last video for tonight. Oh, yeah. Former social justice warrior Carrie Smith explains how to help your friends wake up from the ideology. She's being interviewed by Karlin Borisenko. She's got a doctorate in psychology, specifically organizational planning for corporations to help them have a healthier work environment. Who herself was a leftist, and she started seeing her story is very interesting. She was on a quilting social media group page, and it got really political, and people started ganging up on individuals that, were not from the left, and it was just a disgusting environment, and she was troubled by how vicious radical leftists were. And yeah, it's quite something.
Instead of that, you just drop in your own logo. It used to be.
So Carrie, what changed for you? What was the thing that caused you to kind of start waking up?
So
this is going to be our last video tonight too, guys. It's like 23 minutes long, and then there's just I'll just show a couple more things, and then I'll get to the comments, and that'll be it for tonight. But thanks for sticking with us this long, and I really hope that after you watch all this content, you'll share it with your friends, because everybody needs to see this. Everybody needs to wake up. We are being pushed towards an end that will not be good. Our freedoms will be gone. It's gonna be awful.
Thank you for asking. That's a great question. It took me a while to kind of try and figure this out. It was emotional at first. If you guys haven't read it, you should really check out Jonathan Haidt has a book called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, I think is the subtitle. And in it, he talks a lot about how our minds are built. We have an emotional mind and we have a rational mind. You can think of it that way. He calls the emotional mind your elephant, and your rational mind is your rider. Your elephant, most of the time, is leading your rider. You will emotionally feel something is right, and then you will work backwards and have your rational mind justify it. Mm-hmm. And then there's another book I read after that, which actually referenced that book. It's called Love Your Enemies by Arthur Brooks. And Arthur Brooks, and he talks about how we have to learn to essentially speak to the elephant. You have to speak to people's emotion first. We often find that, we think that if we just give people the right facts and information, they'll come along, they'll change their opinion. It's not about facts. What changed for me, one of the first things that happened that started that I can pinpoint that started to open my mind up a little bit was I went down a rabbit hole on YouTube of videos of people on supposedly my side on the left physically assaulting Trump supporters outside of Trump rallies. And I had never seen these videos. I believed the narrative. I was in my little echo chamber. I was told Trump supporters are violent. They're the ones doing the violence, although I didn't see those videos, not to the same degree. When I opened this up, the media didn't tell me about this. This is people videoing this on their phones and putting it on YouTube. And by the way, YouTube is just like every other large corporation and Google. They have been converged upon by this ideology. They keep changing their algorithm. They've changed it to such a degree now where it's hard to find videos like this now. I don't know if I would have went down that rabbit hole today, because now they just push legacy media. Right. But I found these. I watched one after another, and I just started crying because I was so naive, and I didn't know this was happening. And when you see somebody hitting someone with a brick and people bloodied and a mob pushing the girl that they were throwing eggs at, I don't know if you saw that video. It emotionally did something to me, and it opened my mind emotionally, and that has to happen first. And so I think people need to get better. Those of us who are pushing back against this belief system, and this is not a right-left thing. I'm a liberal. I'm just not an SJW.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're atheist or Christian, or if you are on Republican or Democrat or right or left or conservative it doesn't matter. We need to all be speaking against this, and we all have different gifts and talents, and we're all in.
So I'm sharing this not because she's left the left, but because, like she's just stated, the whole social justice thing is super duper dangerous. And it's actually being used by the globalists and funded by wealthy globalists like George Soros in order to cause great destabilization of Western nations, namely the United States right now. But it's all part of the agenda. And I mean, like, that's pretty much why so many of the people who identified as leftists from every other testimony left the left, was because they saw that the left had been hijacked by social justice warriors. But let's continue.
Different. You can think about whatever world you're in. It's a gift that you're there. You're there to speak to that community, those people, the people in your life, even if it's just one-on-one conversations. We have to get better at telling a story. The facts can come later. We have the facts on our side, but we have to get better at, here's a great example. Cernovich, who I mentioned earlier, this is a guy on the right who I follow. Cernovich said somebody should be taking the audio that just linked from Chicago of the mayor and the alderman arguing and it's basically like Chicago's lost, right?
Right.
Somebody should be taking that and making a viral video, superimposing images of the destruction alongside images and video of the politicians and the media who are supporting this, and intercut it. What does that do? That talks to people's elephants. You're showing them the destruction. Show the Black business owners who are in tears. Show the people that they claim to care about who are hurting because of this, and speak to their elephant first. Because your facts, they're not going to hear. They're not going to hear unless you can learn how to create compelling narratives. And they're really good at speaking to the elephant. The SJW left, it's all they do is speak to emotion.
Well, and I think one of the fundamental things that they, that they used to get people on their team is if you don't agree with them, they're going to call you a racist. And every single person that I know has a visceral reaction to that, right? Of course I'm not a racist. No, like, why would anyone call me a racist? And even that label brings up these connotations like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job if people think I'm a racist. I'm going to lose my friends if people think I'm a racist. Yeah. I mean, you even start to question. I know I started to question. I was like, if I don't shut up and just listen to what they want me to listen to, am I really a racist? And it almost starts to gaslight you after a while.
It does. But see, Carlin, the fact that you asked that question, I asked those questions of myself too. I was like, wait, what's happening to me? Am I, trying to figure it out and untangle what was going on as I was leaving this cult? The fact that you asked that question, that makes you're not one of them ultimately, because you're a person who you're self-reflective. You check yourself. One of the most important quotes I heard as I started leaving this ideology was the Nietzsche quote. I was going to a spiritual center at the time, and I don't know if you would call him a preacher, but the guy who was leading the service, he gave this quote, and I had heard it before, but it didn't stick with me until then. It was, be careful fighting monsters, lest you become the monster you're fighting. Mm-hmm. And that for me was like, wow. Well, first of all, that's what SJWs have become. They think they're fighting racism and sexism. They are racism and sexism. Right. They have become the monsters they fight. They are creating the monsters. But see, now you can't let go of that quote and just say, I can't let go of that quote and say that was just me then. I have to say now in everything that I do, you can become a monster in anything you do. So when I speak about my old belief system, I can't let.
Sorry, there's so many ads in this.
Current world.
I can't let hatred and animosity and resentment or I can't let those things become my fuel. Like I can't become a monster. And so I was very much like you. I was like, wait, what's happening to me? Am I becoming? But because you ask those questions, like that's the way you keep yourself in check.
Yeah,
I think.
I hope so. So Carrie, guess what? We have over 1,000 people watching us right now. So people are obviously really interested in this discussion, which I think is awesome. And I just want to do a quick plug. Guys, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel, turn on the notifications, and please go check out Unsafe Space. You can go to unsafespace.com. They also have their own YouTube channel with, so much amazing content. It is a criminally undersubscribed channel. Go subscribe to Unsafe Space because what Carter and Carrie are doing is so important. So we have a couple of super chats, and I think this is a good question. Rhett says, if I were single with no children, I would not be afraid to speak out. Instead, perhaps I can donate to groups that are fighting this. Do either of you know of anything? I don't know of any groups that are fighting this, Carrie. Do you?
Wow. I don't know of, I'm trying to think if I know of any groups. I don't know of any groups offhand. One might come to me in a second, but I mean, there are individuals like our channel, Unsafe Space, Carlin. There are people content creators who are starting to speak. And I would say definitely support those voices. This is a shameless plug for our channel. I want to be able to dedicate all of my time to talking about this. I dedicate most of it already. But this is not something we don't have sponsors. Most of the people who are who speak against this are demonetized on YouTube. Most of our videos are demonetized. They regularly unsubscribe people from our channel. I found out yesterday, Carlin, they unsubscribed me, my personal account, Carrie Smith, that I used to comment and stuff on YouTube.
Did.
They unsubscribed me from Unsafe Space. So say support those voices. And I'm going to think a little bit more about organizations. Some of the
So next week we're going to be talking about the bias in the news media and how it's actually it's not even bias, friends. It's used as an outright propaganda arm in order to propel the message and the agenda of globalists, Marxist socialists. And the week after that, we're going to be looking at the awful bias, but as well agenda and involvement of social media like YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest, Google, in order to do the same thing. And you heard it right there. She herself was unsubscribed from her own political channel because I don't know how they do it, but they will just they'll find ways to get people so that they're not getting notifications when a new video comes out because they don't want people hearing that information. Like, that should concern the heck out of you. You should be like, what is going on? Because YouTube presents itself, and Facebook and everyone presents itself as a public forum where all ideas are welcome, as long as they're not inciting violence against anyone. Meanwhile, they keep all kinds of awful content up there, even from ISIS sometimes. But they're protected by U.S. law so that they can't be penalized for any negative consequences of their content, of people's content being on there, okay? In exchange for that, though, they're supposed to be operating as not an editor, not an editorial, but as an open public service. So they're not supposed to be doing things in order to censor and silence free speech. Okay, so yeah.
The people I follow, and I'm sure you follow some of these people, like some people who are liberal, like Helen Pluckrose, James Lindsay.
I have Helen Pluckrose on this channel next week, guys.
That's
Shameless
awesome.
plug, next Wednesday at 2 p.m.
That's great. We got a chance to speak with her on Deprogrammed, and it was one of the most interesting. She's one of those people I mentioned earlier who can more intelligently speak about the marriage between postmodernism and Marxism. People like that, like I would say, support those voices because on all sides, they are the powers that be, big social, they're doing what they can to censor any alternative viewpoint. So I guess that would be my answer to that question right now.
Awesome.
And thank you guys for checking this out. I feel like, Carlin, I was so excited to talk to you because, like I said, I feel like we're in a new phase of the belief system of it being spread, and we're seeing it push forward a little more. And my inbox is full of people who are scared. And I know you've seen some of these too, people who are afraid of losing their jobs, people who are being forced to comply, and people who are afraid for their family, losing friends, losing their sense of security and privacy. And the thing is, it will only get worse. Now is the time to speak in whatever way you can. It doesn't have to, everybody doesn't have to speak in the same way. You don't have to start a YouTube. You don't have to, you can talk to your people in your life when the opportunity arises, but you want to speak now before things go in such a bad direction. And there are several bad directions it could go in. If you, again, look at history.
Look at history, friends. We've been talking about that.
And those, and not saying those fears are not justified. They're completely justified.
Yes,
Believe me. I know how justified they are. Carter and I gave up our careers essentially to do this.
Yeah, friends, like, look at history. They're totally spot on.
So I could say whatever I wanted. But you have to do it now. You have to be brave now. And truth is on our side. And I believe in truth. And I believe that this ideology will fall. It's just a matter of how long we let it continue, what it takes for it to fall, how much destruction we allow.
Friends, knowing what I know about where the course of human history is headed, it's not going to get better unless everyone starts sharing the truth and standing up against this. If we don't, and looking around, I don't think I'm seeing enough of it, then we are headed towards complete destruction
along the way.
Yeah.
So,
and I feel like it picked up steam so quickly because when the pandemic originally happened, they were kind of laying low for a while. It was like they didn't know what to do with it, and we were all like, "Is this the end of SJW craziness?" Because it was like we had a real emergency. There was a real thing going on, and now all of a sudden, it's like it's come back, and it's like they gained strength. Yes. They were resting, they were hibernating, and now they're back and stronger than ever before. And it is literally, I mean, in a matter of weeks, Carrie, taking over everything.
Yeah.
It gets crazy. Like I saw like Seattle now has like an independent free zone in the city. Like they're actually like hanging their own street signs. I saw before we got on this, Paw Patrol is canceled. Like stupid stuff like that. Like
Gone with the Wind has been
Gone with the Wind. Yeah. Cops completely canceled. Like it's just like it was like an instant where they took over everything. And I kind of want to echo what you said. Like because I know I get messages like all day now of people who are scared that they're going to lose their jobs. And I understand it. I mean, one of the things I've emphasized is one of the reasons I'm speaking up is I don't report to anyone. There's no way to cancel me. Yeah, I get emails on my website all the time trying to scare me. They're like, "You're never going to work again if you keep saying." I'm like, okay, whatever. But there is sometimes consequence when you speak out. I mean, when I was outed, not even as a Trump supporter, but like as not thinking Trump supporters are Nazis, there was tremendous blowback. But I have to say the freedom that I have found since this whole thing has been so incredibly worth it. It feels, you will go through temporary pain, but I cannot emphasize how amazing it feels to speak your mind.
Yes.
And to not have that fear.
Because you're free.
How amazing.
I was talking about this last night with Mike Harlow. I have greater peace now than I ever did when I was an anxiety-ridden SJW who let my fear control me. And look, things happen I think things happen as they're intended to happen, and they unfold in their own time. And it took me about 6 months before I got over my fear and started speaking. From the time when I realized, okay, here's what I think I really believe. And then the time that I wrote, the first essay I wrote about, it was called Leaving the SJW Cult. I wrote it on Medium, and Jordan Peterson shared it, which was amazing. But I had written to him before he shared it. I had written to him 6 months prior, and he read my letter, but it was anonymous. And I was scared. I was so scared that he read my letter on his channel. And I was scared. I created a new Twitter handle at the time. I had a handle called former SJW because I wanted to start speaking, but I was still scared. And I don't have that anymore. I speak under my name. I've reached, but it is I don't fault anyone for being afraid.
No.
But I hope what I would say to you is like what Carlin's saying. It is so much better on the other side. Once you stop letting the fear control you, like I'm so much more at peace than I ever was before. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's so funny for me because the line that my old friends have been talking about now, because I get wind of they talk about me behind my back like all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And the line is now that I'm just an angry attention whore. I'm like, I've never been happier in my life. I don't know what you guys are seeing, but I am like the least angry person you're ever going to meet in your life right now.
I'm sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant.
No, I love your rants. I think this is fabulous. Teresa the Kid asks, how do we change minds if they won't watch?
I'm not sure if she edited out the rant or if YouTube did, but I know friends, even in these streams, when I go back to watch them and see how they went, YouTube edits out on the fly what's going through their system, detecting every single word being used, etc., in order to edit it out. So when it processes it into your final video, that's going to be saved as a video on demand in your channel. That stuff's gone forever.
Watch or they block us?
So that's a good question. And I'm going to answer it by saying I saw someone in the chat earlier. I just looked in there briefly and somebody was saying, but isn't using emotion kind of cheap? You know, that's what they do.
What's up, Slither? Yeah, you're totally right. I'm not responding to all the comments because otherwise I'd be here all night. But I have BitChute, but I don't know if you can stream to it yet. I should look into it though. I use Restream to stream to several platforms at once.
No, it's not. You still have the facts on your side, but emotion. Look at any study. I mean, you would know this, Dr. K. Are you a psychologist, right?
I am a psychologist.
Yes.
Yep.
So, but that's how people their elephant leads them. You have to learn to speak to the elephant. It doesn't mean don't care about facts. You're in a better position because you have the facts on your side, but you start by speaking with emotion and you build a emotionally compelling story. You use, whether it's in your conversation or you're making viral videos like the one I mentioned before, you tell people a story that pulls at their heartstrings, that helps them understand, because that's what the other side does, is they only speak with emotion and they don't have the facts on their side, but they speak to the elephant. And we need to get better at speaking to the elephant. So yeah, if they won't hear or listen, I don't usually send people that I'm trying to convince.
Thanks, Jacob.
I don't usually send them certainly I don't send them videos from the right because they're going to commit genetic fallacy and say, I'm not going to watch that. That's Tucker Carlson or whatever.
Yeah.
Mostly I try to do it. I just try to make sure that my behavior reflects my beliefs. So if the way that I'm treating someone, if it builds an emotional connection with them because I'm not treating them like crap because they have different beliefs, they're more open to hearing what I have to say. I have people who write me a lot who are like, I don't agree with everything you post. And I don't, sometimes I get mad at you about what you're posting, but I really respect you because of the way I try to treat people. Look, we all have, and I am far from perfect. I went through a 2-week period during the lockdown where I'd previously been like, I don't believe in name calling. And so I'm not going to name call. Your behavior has to reflect your beliefs, right? I went through a period of about 2 weeks where I've just set that aside. And I was like calling names, and it didn't work for me. It did not work for me. And it took me back to that Nietzsche quote about becoming the monster you fight. And I had to let go of that again. You have to make sure your behavior tells people what you believe.
I mean, I tell people, I try to explain this to people on the right all the time. And I say, this is something I've been teaching for years in my workshops and things. People make decisions emotionally and they justify them rationally. Yes. That is true of every single person. And what I hear all the time, and I'm sure you do too, is, Carlin, people on the right make decisions based on facts and people on the left make decisions based on emotions. No, you all do the same thing. You're just processing the information in different ways. And I think the only way that you can really start to change people's minds is just by facts are not going to do it. Statistics are not going to do it. But if you can make a human connection with them, that can start to do it. I mean, one way that I've actually started to see some success in red pilling my friends, not necessarily changing their values, because I don't think my values have changed from being a liberal either, but you know, explaining to them that, listen, I was a loudmouth Trump hater for years and years and years, right?
Me too.
And I never got death threats until now. And here's what they're saying about me. This is why sometimes I post online like the horrible things that people say about me. And I don't even post nearly as much as I get, because I want people to see. I want people to see the blowback when I don't feel like I'm saying anything remotely controversial. And I've been able to make kind of inroads with people who are they hate Trump. They do not like him. But they're starting to see that the left is not what they think it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're exactly right. You make it personal. You make what you're going through personal with them, and you share it. Carter talks about this a bit. He likes to ask people this in when they're having a disagreement about something. He's like, okay, so what if it happened to me? If you're having, what if my channel was censored? What if I got, which, all of us are being censored to a degree. They are demonetizing us. They are changing the algorithms so our videos don't get recommended. But what if we were taken offline? Or what if the mob came after me? Or what if I was forced out of my job, or I was doxxed like Mikey was, and my information was put online so people could make me feel afraid for my security? What if that happened to me? You can personalize it. I love what you're saying, that you're showing that. That's also why I sometimes will point out like the hatred in this. And people say, oh, you're cherry picking things. It's like, you have to see this because you're clearly not in the circles where it's happening. If you're I have a lot of friends who are on the left who, I wouldn't say they're full on SJWs yet, but they accept some of the tenets. They're in that period where they're now being pressured to walk the walk, to speak the words. But it helps. Those are the people that I think you can reach, who are on the fence, who've accepted some of the tenets of the belief, but not all of it.
Yeah.
And you have to, like you said, they have the same values.
Right.
At the end of the day, they are against racism and sexism like you are. You have to show them how this belief system is racist and sexist, because it does a great job of selling itself as the opposite. Great job.
What else do you have for us, Carrie? How can we fight?
Learn to speak to people's elephant. Number one, learn to speak and tell an emotionally compelling story that is backed up with your facts. Number two, become a student of history. Start reading now so that you are more comfortable in your historical grounding, so that you understand what this belief system is. It's not new. It's just evolved. It's just changed a little. Start reading. For me, I'm saying this because these are things I've been doing. This is what I've done, is trying to feel more comfortable in my understanding of what this belief system is. You don't have to be a person who speaks like super geeky, like you don't have to be a person who talks about the complexities of Marxism and postmodernism and how they marry one another, but you definitely want to know a little bit about it so that you're comfortable talking about it in conversations. And just for you, so it helps you see this so much more clearly when you realize, oh, there's nothing new under the sun. This has happened time and time again. We happen to be living in very interesting times again.
Yes.
This has happened before. The other thing I would say, and this is just for me, I'm not trying to preach to anyone.
You did it. Good job.
Eating salads 4 or 5.
This cult-like religion, for me, it was a way to replace God and religion. And I fully believe in what Peterson talks about, which Nietzsche talks about, which is that when you remove God, something will rush in to fill that vacuum. And this is ultimately an empty replacement, I think, because it doesn't have a concept of grace, because there is no concept of forgiveness. It's not about love and acceptance and individualism. It is an evil replacement and an empty one. And like you said, it leaves people, they don't have joy. It leaves people feeling empty and hollow, stuck in a continual perpetuation of having to perform these virtue signaling signs of allegiance.
So many SJW kind of radical leftists that I have exchanged comments with online, and even in person, they won't accept you until you believe what they believe. Whereas I love people even when they, see things completely differently than me, and that's very sad.
And they're never washed of their original sin being their privilege, right? But so for me, once I started leaving this, I found God. I'm not saying that's going to happen for everyone. It doesn't happen for everyone, but find out, I guess I'll put it this way, find out what you believe and why. Carter, my co-host on Unsafe Space, is an atheist. He's like, he doesn't believe that you need to have a belief in God to have a list of what your principles, your moral principles for life and how to live. But there is a lot to learn from, I think, the Bible. And he and I have had conversations about, even if you don't believe in God, you can look at the Bible stories the way Jordan Peterson does, as story, like an allegory for how best to live. There's a lot of stuff in there that you don't have to learn the hard way. Like, I learned a lot of things the hard way. You can, hey, don't lie.
Yeah.
Hey, don't speak lies. That's one of the most important things you can do, is stop speaking lies. Peterson says this all the time. Stop saying things that are not true. Think about your words more. Not in a self-censorship way, just in a way of like, do I feel grounded and comfortable in saying this, or does it make me feel weak to say this?
Wow, that was awesome. That was awesome. The trick to lying is to believe yourself. Yeah, you nailed it, Radical. That's pretty much it, guys. We're not going to show this one because it's long, but here's the same girl, Dr. Karlin Borisenko. Here's what SJWs become addicted to during their indoctrination into the ideology. So she actually talks about all the chemical reactions happening within the brain, and then, of course, all of that dumping into the body, which is what people become addicted to as SJWs. And, it's crazy. And then she goes on to talk about how it's literally changing the physiology of the brain, as well as the actual appearance of these people. And she's referring back to a podcast that she'd listened to with some other commentators. But really, friends, it boils down to like my take on it when I watch all of this is that people are looking for something to believe in, something to be a part of, something to give their lives to, something to have fulfillment in. And it's like, it's one cause to the next, Oh, I'm angry about this and we got to fight this. And then it's, okay, that we won. Okay, now the herd's moving over here. Oh, whoa. And then, okay, news media is telling us to be angry about this. Oh, and I don't mean to judge. I don't mean to be mean in saying this, because I would have been guilty of this too. Except that I have found the true meaning of life. But had I not, I probably would have ended up like this. In fact, I was on that path. I can remember being 29 and starting to think in these ways. But it's pathetic. It's pathetic being dragged along, led by propaganda and lies that are being forwarded and furthered by these elite globalists who are using all this to destroy us so that they can take over everything and control us. And we're going to see more and more of that as we continue on in this series. But the chemicals released from the brain, the dopamine, serotonin, whatever, that make you feel good when you're a part of this, in terms of being a part of something, it's just fake. It's not where it's at, and it's completely destructive. So here's a list of just some of the black commentators that I have stumbled upon that are pro-Trump, have left the left, are against what's going on. This guy, Anthony Brian Logan, does lots of commentary. We've already seen Officer Tatum. We've got the Conservative Twins, aka the Hodge Twins. Conservative Twins is their channel that's more about politics and what's going on in the news. Hodge Twins is more their their comedy channel. These guys are stand-up comedians that work together. They're pretty raunchy sometimes. That's true. But a lot of what they talk about, you know, it's true. And it's from a perspective that to some people out there means more than coming from some white guy in his office, you know, and that's fine. You know, I think personally that's really ignorant, because truth is truth regardless. Doesn't matter who it comes from. But some people, you know, they won't believe what I say about these things, but they'll believe what these guys have to say about it. Here's another guy, Barricade Garage. He is hilarious. Clearly a Trump supporter and against all of this stuff. Very awake to what's going on with the globalist agenda and all of that. But, you know, he started off doing car fixing videos because he's a mechanic. And I guess because COVID, maybe he had to stop working or something, but he has put out so many short sketches that are just absolutely hilarious. I recommend his channel. This guy's another guy that just popped up in my feed. You know, thankfully, sometimes the YouTube algorithm gets it right. His name's Young Ripa, and I guess he streams playing video games on Twitch, but also talks about comic books, but also now talks a lot about politics and just how wrong black people on the left are and how, unfortunately, they're being used. This is Thomas Sotomayor. I used to watch him a little bit a few years back. He, again, also super raunchy in his like comedy. But I understood like some of the things he was talking about. Very true. But here he is on the Rubin Report with Dave Rubin. So, you know, great perspectives to go listen to rather than remain in an echo chamber where you're just listening to CNN, MSNBC, CBC, CTV, Global TV, and, you know, the people on Facebook or whatever that are all about the left. Coleman Hughes talking about police brutality. Oh my gosh, the stuff that he says, you know, again, has left the left. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's just a very deep thinker. David Webb, here he is. He was actually over a phone interview accused of white privilege because this black politician or whatever she was thought he was a white guy. You can look that YouTube video up. It's so funny. But yeah, and here he is in a debate saying that the United States is not institutionally racist. Why would he think that? Why is he saying that? Well, you've got to listen. You got to figure it out. And then another one, Thomas Sowell, again on the Rubin Report, a very deep thinker, a great conservative mind, talking about that there's no systemic racism. Why would he say that? You know, again, all of these people I just listed, voraciously attacked, called Uncle Tom, called all kinds of awful names because these are their words, they have left the plantation of the Democratic Party because they understood and believed that they were oppressed and that they were sitting under a system of lies in order to keep them enslaved as voters. And we heard a lot of that talked about tonight. But that's pretty much all I've got, guys. I thought it was important to just talk a bit about why the left is leaving the left. And you know, it's got everything to do with realizing that it's not headed in a good direction. Oh my gosh. And so I just hope that would open people's eyes, because next week we're going to be talking about some hot topics because the news we're being fed is a lie. And yeah. So let's just go back and let's look at some of these comments. So you're Canadian and super into U.S. politics, says Radical. So I'm Canadian and I'm only using these U.S. commentators just to help people on the left, even in Canada, which is even more left than the United States, understand why there's so much danger in the left. And ultimately it's because it's been hijacked, or it's always been commandeered and steered and puppeted by globalist Marxists intent on oppressing us all in their own one world government. And if people in the United States can leave the Democratic Party and be in favor of Donald Trump, who we've all been brainwashed and conditioned to believe is this awful white racist who hates black people and Hispanics and everyone else, and is, you know, a horrible nationalist, which is actually a good thing to be patriotic about your country. If people down there can leave and love Trump, well, then people up here in Canada should be able to assess what's going on with the Trudeau Liberal government and the NDP parties and whatnot, and see the socialist Marxist systems they're dragging us into as our freedoms erode, and say, you know what, this is dangerous. I'm going to walk away. And frankly, the Conservative Party is not much better. It's pathetic. But gosh, you know, we just got to get away from where we are. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks for stopping by. I'll start back at the beginning here. Suicide Strip says hi. Hey. Whom tight head says based. Okay. Chad says hi. Yep. Hopefully that works out, man. Rod says, sorry I've missed a few times. I have been working. Happy belated birthday. Oh, thanks, Rod. And no problem, man. I hope you're able to catch up with it. But I mean, Rod knows what's going on. He shares this stuff all the time. Suicide says again, hey. Okay, yep. Holy. You have so many YouTube tabs open. Yep, very true. Lots of stuff to go through. Rod says, this system is ironical. They made money through capitalism, yet they are about to deny the 99% the same rights that they used to become the elite. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter to the elite though, Rod, because they're at the top of the system, right? So they'll impose anything in their puppeted government system, then the rules won't apply to them. They'll be above it all. And so they'll be able to keep making money hand over fist. And it's disgusting, but that's the agenda. A socialist Marxist system where we're all oppressed, paying into a very small number of private industry companies for all of our needs so that those people make money more and more. Gosh, we got some lovely trolls here. I told you 3 months ago it's time for a civil revolution. I disagree. I have no interest whatsoever in killing my countrymen. I don't want to go up against the police. I don't want to go against the military. I myself am a veteran. I believe in these things. But we definitely need to have a revolution of the mind and help people change how they think by just giving them the truth and showing them, like this girl, Carrie, became a student of history and saw, oh my gosh, history's going to repeat itself. So we're always on a trajectory, okay? And then there's like some sort of a reset, right? Where thankfully often we get some freedom. And then as society becomes demoralized and debased, it heads towards being taken over again. How interesting that works that way. I'll share at the end, though, what my thoughts are regarding revolution. Gangs and criminals didn't follow laws before this legislation. How does this prevent them from continuing? He's talking about the gun ban. And yeah, it doesn't. It's all about taking away our firearms. Neck lacing is what is happening in the third world countries without any justification. In point of fact, these same countries have underfunded police forces, so why would we want to degenerate into that culture? Not exactly sure what he's saying there, but we definitely do not want to go the way of many of the underdeveloped nations out there. Someone says they love Brendan Straka of Walkaway, for sure. Want to chat on Discord like podcast? I'm Scottish, UK streamer. That'd be cool, man, sometime. How many videos you got? I got a lot of videos. I don't have a lot of subs. I guess over all my platforms I probably have like 400 or 500 subs, but I don't get frequent viewers. Like tonight we started off 26 people viewing. Now we've got 4. And so friends, I mean, people got to be sharing the information. I think the best thing is to have sit-down conversations or at least chats via Facebook Messenger. Hopefully Skype, where you can actually see each other. You know you're not screaming. We'll make interesting conversations. Me being in Scotland. Comics now, they're going to rock it, no doubt. Oh, he's talking about, I think when I was talking about Young Rippa, maybe? I don't know. What should matter is that you're human. We're talking about the racism that was going on. And yeah, like, and then so many of the black conservatives, that's where they're standing. They are so, you'll see it next week. It's very interesting, their opinions on things. I don't like media. What they say, people usually believe. Yep, exactly. It's very unfortunate. We see them in behind the desk. We see Walter Cronkite, and we just trust their authority. They're here to give us the nightly news. Callie says, hey, what's up? Just grabbing a bite and watching the stream. Thanks, man. Trump makes more and more sense to me every day. Yep. Media corrupts the youth, which most of our youth, 15 to 25, are very sheltered and don't know any better. It's very true, man. Like, if you don't have life experience and you're getting all your information from one source, there's no option. You're going to believe that. Anyone can be, don't know what's saying. Oh, Blade class. Love that movie. It's the same in LA. There's places, this is Callie again, where if you don't hate white people, they no longer like you. That is racism from the very communities pretending to fight racism. And it's unfortunate because they're being taught in colleges and in sociology classes and all that political science and garbage that you can't be racist against white people because you cannot be racist against the power players or whatever. And it's just so gross. I mean, like, that's just such an awful lie to try and tell people and indoctrinate people with. Can we get an F in the chat for my man's Grant Imahara? I don't know what that means. Pillow guy, my pillow. Cancel culture is just one complaint away from having anyone anywhere fired. It's very true. It's awful. So no one wants to say anything? Oh yeah, sorry, Slither. Like I said, I wasn't replying. Same trick line as the yep. Are they giving out line tips? Heck yeah. Let's all join Hotel Charlie Hill so we could be together. Oh, thanks, dude. Is it not safe to say the elite globalists already own and control everything, including us? Yeah, for the most part, but there still is a semblance of freedom, which is what we're trying to hang on to, radical. So you're a Canadian? Okay, yep. Preach, you're the man? No, no, I'm just a man. Isn't Canada like super socialist? No, but it's over towards the left, towards socialism, and it's getting worse and worse all the time. It doesn't matter what party we put in either. They both, it just gets so bad. July 21st, hammer time. Oh, it's July 21st? Black Lives Matter. Warhead posts a GIF here. Black Lives Matter is a joke. Yeah, that's an interesting organization we'll be talking about next week. Thank you for your service, Mike. Oh, my pleasure, man. We have indeed triple LMAO. Not sure what you're laughing about there, but anyways, guys, that's it for the stream. Yeah. I guess that's all we can say here. There we go. So yeah, I'm Michael, aka Hands and Feet from HeHasAnswers.com. You can check it out, guys. The real thing is, just like Carrie found, like, God's the answer. We are in such a mess. Here's a truth bomb for you, friends. The fact that we are on a globalist agenda and that history repeats itself should make you get in your Bible, because throughout history, we have seen again and again and again empires rise where one person, one proud and haughty king, believed he should be the ruler of the entire known world. We saw it in Assyria. We saw it in Babylonia. We saw it with the Roman Empire. We saw it with the Greeks and the Macedonians. It happens again and again and again. And that's what they're trying to build now. And socialism's the way to go. It should be of no coincidence to you, friends, that we had a number of videos tonight where people were calling on God for help, praying before their Blexit rallies, whatever. And meanwhile, socialism, Marxism, what the globalists are trying to push on us, are completely antithetical to what the Bible is about and completely godless. And I know a lot of people like to say, oh, Christianity's killed so many people, which is not even remotely true. Not even remotely true, especially when you consider the Catholic Church or whomever was involved in Salem witch hunts or something are not real Christians because they believe in works for your salvation rather than just trusting in Christ. No, look at the facts. Like at least 50 million people in the last 100 years have been killed because of communism and socialism and whatnot. Agenda 21. Thanks for doing this. It helps a lot of people wake up. I really hope it does, Trevor. We only got 4 people watching right now. My last video had something like 800 views, but I'm not sure if that's just a Facebook thing because a person saw it in their timeline and just scrolled by it, or if they're actually clicking on it and beginning to watch. And I really hope people are watching it. But yeah, I'm going to end the way I always do, friends, because we got to call on the name above all names, the only one that can help our situation. And, if you don't like that, okay, that's unfortunate. But tune in next week because the truth is still the truth and you can still help fight the battle. What I realized, friends, when I was talking about the meaning of life earlier, there's only one thing you can do in life that's going to have an everlasting, eternal, infinite impact and bring yourself infinite, eternal reward, but also be beneficial to other people. And that's to help people know who God is, to share the gospel with people. Every other thing that you do, doesn't matter how powerful your social justice movement is, in 1,000 years, 10,000 years, it's going to mean nothing. And I don't think we even have 10,000 years anymore, or even 1,000 years. Well, we could have 1,000 years literally in a millennial kingdom. But yeah, we need God's help. And I came to realize, like, the meaning of life, my purpose for existence was to give glory to God. And the Westminster Catechism teaches, I think the very first edict is, the chief end of man is to bring glory to God and enjoy him forever. And that's why God's made us, to reflect who he is, glorify him, show people how great he is, and enjoy our friendship and relationship with him, as well as our service to him, as he is our master who's bought us with a price. So, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for another day. God, we thank you that you are in control and that you are sovereign over everything, and we can trust you no matter what happens. If things get better, praise God. If things get worse, we can still praise God, and you're going to see us through, and everything is happening according to your plan, just like you have forewarned in your word, the Holy Bible. And anyone who wants to be a good student of that can seek you and ask you for help and understanding, and as they read through it, they will see time and time again prophetic verses and passages and even whole chapters and books that point to what we're going through and what we're approaching. And most of all, God, we thank you for your grace that, like Carrie had mentioned, original sin. Well, we all have original sin and we're sinners by nature, but you have paid the price by sending your son, Jesus, God in the flesh, to die on the cross and take the penalty for our sin and then rise again, conquering death, so that we too, by grace, through faith in his finished work and trusting in you and following him as Lord and Savior, can also have eternal life and be gifted his perfect righteousness so that we can be with a perfect God for the rest of eternity, rather than, unfortunately, be banished because of our sin from a holy God who cannot be around sin. So thank you for your grace in that gift, and I pray that all listening will also seek you, because you are just so wonderful. And I pray, Lord, that the truth will go far and wide so that people can resist the works of the devil and this wicked, evil agenda, and that we could have more time on earth in freedom to grow your church for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, guys, God bless you. Thank you so much. I'll show you one real quick thing. If you go to He Has Answers on your PC, unfortunately, does not work very well on the on smart devices. But yeah, my buddy's brother out of nowhere just said, hey man, I know how to do some coding. You want me to help you build a site? So you can go, you can read the beginnings and a huge work, free ebook I put together, or you can listen to me read a rough draft of it on YouTube. Sounds awful, but at least then you don't have to read. You can keep doing your daily errands or whatever. There's some different media here. Most of these links don't really work yet. And then there's also this awesome invitation. An invitation because you have questions and he, capital H, has answers. I'm referring to God, of course. So yeah, he designed this. It's pretty slick. Works really nice on a big PC. Not so much on a phone or an iPad. But yeah, so you can ask God questions. For example, God, why do bad things happen? And you just work your way through each and every one of these passages, and the Holy Spirit of God, friend, if you're humble, like the directions up here tell you, you'll hear from him. And in the end, listen to this from Genesis 50, verse 20. As for you, this is Joseph speaking to his brothers who sold him into slavery and betrayed him. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So friends, why do bad things happen? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and it all builds together. But, you know, one of the big reasons is God loves turning evil around for good so that people look and see the pain and suffering someone's gone through, who's then come around by the grace of God, and they look at that and they go, there's no explanation for how you recovered and the good that you're doing now except for God. And it also makes the devil look like a fool because he's constantly tempting people to destroy other people and hurt other people. And then his agenda is shown to be pitiful and not unable to succeed. And so maybe in this with the globalists, God will pull another 180, but I kind of don't think so, friends, but that's my hope. So get the truth out there. Amen, Trevor. God wins. God wins in the end. It's going to be awesome. All right, everybody. Peace out. Have a great night. God bless. See you, Trevor.